34. The cause and end of movement. Author's note. I nearly made my goal of updating the first week of November. Harvest is finally past, and my hours will be much more lenient. Of course, holidays are also near, and we all know what that means. Hope everyone enjoys this chapter, and I plan to have the next up in a week. Many thanks to everyone who helped make this chapter brilliant. GJ Mega, JDH41, and Costin. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Desire itself is movement not in itself desirable. Love is itself unmoving, only the cause and end of movement, timeless and undesiring, except in the aspect of time caught in the form of limitation between unbeing and being. T. S. Eliot, 4 quartets. Harry sat on his bed, eyes locked on the scarlet form of Fawkes. The phoenix perched on a corner of his desk chair, where he had been since he mysteriously appeared over a week before. Why the Phoenix had come to Durmstrang from Hallamsund and not returned to Dumbledore was something that left him clueless, and Fawkes refused to speak to him about it. Shouldn't I be feeding you? Harry wondered idly aloud, as the Phoenix continued to ignore him. Or at least get you a decent perch if you're staying. Are you staying? Still, Fawkes was stubbornly silent. If Harry wasn't mistaken, the bird seemed unusually solemn, its attitude morose as it tucked its head under one scarlet wing. Harry frowned. Enough is enough. This isn't like you. It was after the dinner hour. For the first time in nearly a month, Harry and Hermione had attended the formal meal in Durmstrang's grand dining room. It had been a stilted, silent affair, punctuated with sparse conversation between the various adult wizards and their charges. Of all the school champions, only Dylan and Gal had seemed civil. And Harry had returned to his room, on edge and scowling, to be met with a phoenix that seemed to be in the midst of a deep depression. Harry abruptly stood, the motion drawing Fawkes's elegant head up once more. Harry raised his hand towards the door, flinging up silencing charms and locking it with a snap, just in case. He didn't want a repeat of the fiasco at Hogwarts the year before, when Hermione had discovered his phoenix form. Talk to me, Fawkes, please. The phoenix's breast puffed out in a feathered sigh, its feathers glowing dully in the sparse light. Harry's fists clenched together, and he shrugged off his outer robe, his shirt soon following before he toed off his shoes. He met the black eyes of the bird with anger growing in his belly. Then he called the flame to his fingers, first his hands, then spreading up his arms and shoulders, a wreath of flame. It had taken him many times transforming into his phoenix form to discover he could mitigate some of the pain by first summoning the powerful fire. But only some. The agony rushed over him, bones breaking and skin pierced through with hot needles that turned to soft quills. His legs broke and reformed, new black-scaled skin stretched taut over clawed feet. His hands became wings, flapping aggressively to stop his forward motion as the transformation bowled him over. His beak parted in a harsh pant, his one-pained shout echoing in the room. Fawkes had turned to face him, the bird larger in his sight now, of equal size but superior grace. Harry sang, a soft, hesitating lilt to his voice, seldom used or practiced in this form. Please, for a long moment Fawkes did not move, black eyes liquid and dark, feathers still and unruffled and calm. And then the phoenix turned his back, an awkward shuffle on the desk chair, and anger rose like a tidal wave inside of him, breaking his control. Harry jumped into the air, his magic giving him lift in the confined space, his wings spread wide, and with a fast dive he slammed into the phoenix, his flame rising to take them both into open space, soft flickers of white spiraling around them. Fawkes screeched, his clawed legs slashing out painfully across Harry's feathered breast as he twisted in his hold. Harry released him with a harsh sound of his own, and found himself in the air above the white mountains of Norway, Fawkes hovering across from him with rage in his song. Attack! Pain! Harry launched himself at the golden phoenix again, and Fawkes began to glow with orange and red flames, his scarlet wings afire in the dark sky. They clashed together, scaled legs tangling in grasping slashes, wings beating furiously at their backs as they fell, until Harry wrenched free with another pained gasp as the furious phoenix slashed him again. Still, Fawkes' song was filled with hateful rage. Pain, betrayal, pain. Harry found himself rapidly trying to escape as the fiery tempest attacked him, flame not his own wrapping him in warm tendrils, his own fire rising to combat it in swirling bursts of light. Fox's song was beautiful and awful at the same time, full of pain and anger, unbelievable hurt. Betrayed, fallen brother of light pain. Harry twisted and dived, seeking a safe haven from the ripping slashes. Inside him, dread was beginning to hiss in outrage. The squeaker has gone mad. Harry had no time to respond. He felt claws dig into his back, a heavy force tangling with his wings and throwing him off balance to tumble freely towards the ground. In panic, Harry raised his voice in song, frantic bursts of emotion and imagery, the thought song of the phoenix, a jarring melody from his throat. Brother of light, I am a brother, sorry, forgive, worried. Fox's claws seemed to spasm on his back, twin sparks of fire that cut his song off as he tore himself away. Harry twisted again, his back facing the mountain below, and summoned his fire to carry them both back into healing flame, the warmth rushing forth to soothe the wounds upon his form. Fox hovered nearby, and Harry braced himself for another attack, prepared to grapple with the bird all night, if that was what it took to gain answers. Then, to his shock, he saw the phoenix was crying. Liquid tongues of golden fire dripped from Fox's dark eyes to join the white heat swirling around them. The phoenix's angry song turned to absolute misery. Falling into darkness brings pain, my brother, lost to the light. Harry felt confusion swirl within him, along with a good dose of pain. Had the phoenix also realized what dread was? Some sort of dark magic? Was Fox going to leave him, deny him friendship? But dread had been a part of Harry for longer than he had ever known the phoenix. Surely the bird would have never trusted him to begin with. Who Harry sang softly, hovering near, their beating wings nearly touching. How Fox lifted his head in a keen, fire rippling over his form, as the phoenix took them once more to open air. No longer mountains below, but the shifting hot sands of Heliopolis. Night still reigned around them, the stars glittering high in the sky. My brother, my companion, my chosen, lost to dimness, lost, unable to remember love, trust, truth, Harry knew. He remembered Fox's outraged behavior the night. He retrieved Hermione from the headmaster's office, remembered how the phoenix had flown between them. Protected them. Quietly, Harry spoke with the power rippling about him, leaving the phoenix song for clearer speech. He thought he was doing what was best, for everyone. He didn't want to defend the headmaster. A part of him hated the man, hated his schemes and manipulations. A part of him was glad that Fox could see that now as well. But he hated even more that his friend was in such obvious pain. Fox's tears still fell, each one dropping to the sand far below, moonlight glittering off their liquid surface like captured starlight. None can know what is best to light the world. The phoenix lifted wings and head, his long tail streaming behind him where he flew. The crest on his neck flared against the sky as he sang. To attempt such is to cast a shadow upon the ground, is to steal light from whom it is given, leaving only great darkness behind. Harry felt the words pierce him, and found himself rebelling against them. Then why even try? If we only cause more pain for trying to make things better. Fox lowered his head, the gold of his feathers pale in the darkness, the scarlet as deep as blood. Must cast own light, not shade others, not take from one to spread apart. Such stolen light fades quickly as torn apart by darkness. Harry hovered, silent, the meaning of the words coming to him in snatches, translating the images and emotion to things he could better understand. Light was justice to the phoenix, was everything good and pure and right, sometimes soft and sometimes harsh. Everyone was graced with their own light in different measures, had their own task to either shine brighter or fade away into the dark. Dumbledore used to be a beacon of hope, a light wizard who fought for the good of everyone, but he had changed. He wasn't evil, but he was so consumed with his version of the greater good that he failed to see those he trampled when striving for it, failed to see how causing misery to a few to spare many was not the light's way, was not good or right. The headmaster would have sacrificed Hermione with tears in his eyes, but sacrificed her nonetheless if it furthered his plans. Fox had seen that, and the fragile thread that bound them had finally broken. Harry wondered if Dumbledore knew it. If the headmaster could sense that his greatest companion was lost to him now, would never return. What held Fox now? Why had the phoenix stayed? Harry realized abruptly that this might be goodbye, that the phoenix might be leaving for good, retreating to wherever the magical creatures went when those humans they chose perished or fell away. I'm sorry, Harry whispered, pain swirling through his magic. I'm sorry. Fox keened again. the light spreading from him in a starburst of agony, and around them Harry saw answering flames, red and orange and white, all the colors of phoenix fire. A song began to thrum in his bones, along his wings, and through his feathered skin, phoenixes appearing around them without prompting to take up Fawkes' song, a dirge that echoed what Harry had led for the great alchemist, only 1,000 times more mournful, for the one lost was to darkness and not to death, something the immortal phoenixes saw as a fate far worse than death. Lost, 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 Harry began to leave the center, his wings casting him farther and farther away from the hot nexus of pain that swirled around his friend, pain cutting to his soul. Dread curled tight against his mind, a cold touch of rational thought. Leave, master. This is not a place for us. It hurts. Harry wanted to leave, but he found himself unable to look away from the familiar phoenix in the midst of agony, broken magic swirling around him. If he left, he would be turning his back, putting his own selfish happiness above another's. He made himself hover there, at the edge of the crowd of crying creatures, bearing the pain with Fawkes in the only way he knew how, a helpless observer. Why had Fawkes waited so long? It had been a month of depressed vigil. Had the Phoenix hoped Dumbledore would change? Had he been giving him a last chance? Could phoenixes go into denial? Could a creature unable to lie to others lie to themselves? Perhaps if one did not speak, one would not have to lie. Abruptly, so sudden, Harry found himself faltering in the air. The song swelled to a crescendo and was silent, the void left like the end of a life, the last gasp of a dying man, or a bond. With a sound like shattering glass, magic whipped across them, a tangled web of memory and power. Harry heard Dumbledore's pained gasp in his mind, a world away from where they flew. The other phoenixes disappeared, winking out one by one, until all that was left was a dim orange and red Fawkes, a phoenix whose light had gone out. The wind whipped past them, ruffling feathers and lifting wings. Fawkes hung in front of him, unfathomable black eyes blank and empty. They stared at each other, the air devoid of fire or song, too silent after the frenzy of light and sound that came before. Gone, Fawkes whispered quietly. Alone, no, Harry said, finding himself echoing the very words he himself had heard spoken to him ages ago. Brother of light, never alone. Fawkes moved closer, the two phoenixes swirling together in a circle as the wind moved them. A light began to enter Fawkes's eyes, the golden crest on his head rising. I burn, the phoenix sang, his voice still soft and delicate and dark. Always and again I burn. Harry wanted to laugh, or smile, show any emotion he found impossible in a bird's body. Instead, he brushed his wings against Fawkes in a parody of a hug, his own dark scarlet wings barred with black, blending into the night even as Fawkes stood apart from it, taking up the phoenix song again to cheer up his friend. You are meant to burn, you are made with fire, Fawkes trilled an answer, a joyful sound that lightened Harry's heart. Then burn with me, brother of light, you too are fire. Flame rose upon the phoenix as he sang, and Harry found his own flames summoned from him against his will, a tug of power running along his own. Dread wailed inside him. No, not the squeaker, master. He is too beautiful and loud and hot. If Harry hadn't been so confused, he would have laughed. The characteristics the serpent held against another were similar to ones he himself held. Harry found himself floundering, unable to control his own power as the phoenix in front of him pulled it forth. Waves of magic unleashed to ripples across the night, every barrier he held upon it falling aside as it gained freedom. And Harry's runes began to burn, runes he realized still lay under the feathers of his phoenix form, unseen and unnoticed, until now, as all the power he held in check, safely hidden, was briefly let loose to roam about him like a phoenix itself, wings spread wide to gather in the night itself under its power. He burned. Phoenix flame burst around, and inside him, a sudden turn of cool wind to unbearable heat. He could no longer hear dread, only the beautiful phoenix song, spreading calm and love over him in a warm blanket, his eyes suddenly blind, his beating heart stuttering under the force of it. Fawkes touched his mind, his soul with fiery heat. It was an echo of the sun, a portion of its unwavering power. For a long moment Harry was pinned there, unseeing and unhearing, his entire being a figure of light as it stood in judgment. When the phoenix finally pulled away, some of the light remained, a warm heat in his heart. A bond, Harry realized with sudden exhaustion. The damn squeaker tricked us. Dred's voice returned with fierce anger to his mind. He sang and cried and then pounced upon us when we drew near in sympathy. Where did you learn to curse? Harry asked tiredly, his eyes closing of their own accord even as he realized he was laying in his bed at Durmstrang, his return there unfathomable. Dred hissed. I listen. Get rid of it. Get rid of the burning shackles. Harry could only shake his head where he lay prone. Inside, against his magic, within the coil of the feathered Quetzalcoatl, a new spark burned with fire, a ribbon of light whose feathered edge was warm and bright. His mind touched that spark, and he knew with sudden clarity that Fox perched sleeping on his desk chair once more, the Phoenix's mind peaceful and content. Well, I guess that means he's staying. Harry thought dimly as sleep rose to pull him under. And I'll need to buy a perch. Albus woke to pain. The last few weeks had been hard on the headmaster of Hogwarts. Unable to be physically present at his beloved school, he worried. In the hallowed caverns of Durmstrang, he knew his enemies plotted around him, and he worried. Without his greatest companion and confidant, he worried. His worries multiplied upon themselves like an inevitable tide, rising to drown him. It kept him up late into the night, which was why he was slumped at his desk when his chest clenched with agonized fire. He opened his eyes, a fist rising to grab at his heart as it spasmed. His vast magic stirred and raised its ancient head, slow to rise but unfathomably large, a bloated animal, old but only more dangerous for its experience. Albus gasped, a harsh breath drawn into his lungs by the full force of his will. There was no enemy to attack. His quarters were empty. The pain was coming from the inside. Another pulse of burning fire gripped his heart. He groaned aloud, his power shaking the desk in front of him, sending tremors across the floor. Albus closed his eyes and looked within. His magic lurked within every nook and cranny of his frail body, keeping it spry and alive when any magicless man would turn to dust. It manipulated the world around him, often without his will. It brought a sparkle to eyes that should have been dull and grey with age. And within its heart, its sphere, pulsed his own heart, the organ that brought magic and life and blood. For years upon years, since he was only in his middle age, a band of fire had existed there. After the capture of his oldest friend, the duel that had broken his heart and shaken his soul, Dumbledore had fled into study and far-off countries, escaping the fame of the defeat of Grindelwald, seeking to heal, seeking peace. The Phoenix had came to him in Egypt, as he sought tutelage from the great alchemist, Nicholas Flamel. Albus had named him Fox, awed beyond measure with the majestic creature. He had learned all he could, and written books about them himself, as he learned more about the mysterious creatures of legend, the immortal bird of fire. In the end, he had known that what he knew was far outpaced by what he still could learn. Fox had soothed the ache in his heart, sang away the nightmares of the fateful duel, cried tears of sorrow when Albus in turn cried. The Phoenix had kept on giving more of itself, always there, always ready to help and listen. And in the end, Albus had thought the Phoenix would never leave. Perhaps could never leave. They were bound together. He had researched that as well, learning of familiars and what made them so rare and beloved. A companion for life, the one who would always be there, even when family and friends deserted and enemies circled around. But phoenixes were not Kneazles or Krupps, owls or frogs or even snakes. Phoenixes possessed a great magic that gave them a choice. The bond was even more powerful because of it, and they were, most importantly, beings of the light, pure will and justice. Oh, my friend, you don't understand. Albus whispered through the agony that gripped him and felt a thread of sorrow trickle to him, a last farewell, a song of regret and love and power. And the band of fire, his familiar bond, shattered. Albus would have cried then, or perhaps only screamed with the pain of something that should never be broken, gone forever. Something that, once lost, could never be retrieved again. But darkness stole his vision instead, a deep hollow space, and he fell down into unconscious horror. When he woke, he was empty, a vacant vessel that once held the greatest light. Harry blinked up into Hermione's worried brown eyes. Finally, she gasped, and as her head moved out of his vision, he saw that he was still lying in his bed, in yesterday's clothes, his body aching. Finally, he croaked, then cleared his throat as he sat up, shaking his head. Hermione folded her arms across her chest, lips pursed. It's past lunchtime. Your door is still warded shut, by the way. And Griffin couldn't take the ward down without damaging the door. I just had Darby teleport me inside to make sure you were all right. What is going on? Harry looked across the room towards Fox, who was still sleeping peacefully on his chair. He closed his eyes briefly, roving a mental eye over the bright ribbon of fire that ran through the center of his magic. When he looked again at Hermione, he only shook his head with a sigh. Fox left the headmaster last night. Hermione frowned, glancing toward the Phoenix. He's left him before to stay with you. He's been here for over a week, in fact. Harry looked down at his hands, absently clenching one fist. This time's different. It's permanent. Oh, Hermione said, brown eyes wide. She looked more strongly at the Phoenix before leaning over to whisper. Is he all right? Is this because of the tournament? Harry's face darkened. I can't say for sure. I think the tournament was the last straw. He spent more and more time with me over the last few years, but he was always the headmaster's. Now I guess he's mine. Do I think he's all right? He wasn't before today. He was depressed and I guess hoping Dumbledore would change. Perhaps the headmaster never even tried to call him back, but I tried to confront him about it and he attacked me. Hermione blinked in surprise, her voice rising as she spoke. He attacked Y.O. Harry rubbed the back of his neck in embarrassment. I might have attacked him first, but he was ignoring me. I needed to get through to him that I cared, that I was worried. That's why the door was locked. Didn't want anyone walking in on me in my Phoenix form. Hermione looked skeptical. So he goes from attacking you to deciding you will be his next master. Harry laughed. Not his master. It doesn't really work that way with Phoenixes. I'm more like a brother, a companion, one to travel with, fight with, live with. Hermione leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Sounds like what I've read about familiars. But you can only have one, and I always thought dread was like that for you. Plus, the tradition is a bit outdated. Most modern wizards and witches just have pets, not real familiars. You have to do a ritual to bond with an animal. Her voice had taken on a lecturing tone. Harry recognized the last two sentences as being nearly word for word from one of their modern wizarding history books. He smiled. Fox performed his own ritual last night. I was just along for the ride. He chose me, not the other way around. I've read about familiars, and if that is what he is, it is not the same as with a more usual animal. But Dread, I don't know what to call him. He's not even an animal, so how can he be my familiar? He's something different. Hermione reached out to lay a hand on his, face set in firm lines. We'll find out what Dread is, Harry. We just need to keep looking. It will simply require less explanation if you take me, if you don't mind. Harry finished awkwardly after explaining to a silent Fox a request to take himself and the others to the werewolf sanctuary. And as he had the last two times Harry had asked, the Phoenix only lifted two wings in his own version of a shrug. Harry frowned at him. I want to know if that's all right. Fox tilted his head. Just say something. Harry groused finally, standing from where he sat on his bed. Fox sang a soft tune, one that told Harry the Phoenix was feeling content and nothing more. Harry groaned. He had thought the Phoenix being his familiar would make things easier. Instead, he was uncertain just where he stood with the magical creature. He didn't want to simply tell the Phoenix what to do all the time, but when Fox wouldn't even answer a question, clearly it made that difficult. I don't even know what you eat, Harry abruptly burst out, whirling to face the Phoenix. You've stayed with me entire summers, and I've never seen you eating. Am I supposed to feed you something special? Are there Phoenix treats? How can I be a good companion to you when I don't even know that? Harry turned helpless eyes to Fox, whose golden feathers gleamed in the firelight. Then the bird sang, and this time the words came to him. Peace, brother of light, I need nothing. Harry eyes him for a moment, then shrugged. All right, then. Just let me know if that changes. Fox only tucked his head under one wing, his breast rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. Harry walked from the room, still uncertain. What does one do with a phoenix, exactly? Are they just elegant ornamentation, except when one needs them to teleport around the world or through wards? And Harry didn't even need him for that. They obviously were great to talk to, if not excellent communicators themselves. Now that he looked back, he realized Fox had been mostly silent every other time they had been together. He just hadn't questioned it. What did a phoenix think about so much, anyway? The afternoon of the full moon, Harry assembled beside the others with Fox upon his shoulder. Dylan was looking at the scarlet bird with fascinated eyes, fingers practically twitching to reach out and touch him. Hermione was silent next to him, eyes once more avoiding his. What camaraderie they had gained the previous day over Fawkes had left for the more awkward silence that had pervaded since their discussion about the Yule Ball. Harry hoped to speak to Remus about it at some point. When he had dropped Sirius off earlier, there had been no time, and Sirius himself seemed morose, and not in the mood to talk about anything remotely female. Maybe his friend would cheer him up. "Ready," Griffin declared happily, and Harry was brought out of his musings. He glanced around, then looked at Fawkes. "The Pungo Lake Pack's compound, Fawkes, please." The phoenix trilled, and his fire began to rise in colorful streams to consume them. The sun was still high in the sky when they appeared in eastern North Carolina. The leaves on the trees about them had now been completely shed, no longer bearing the fall colors Harry had observed the month before. The air, in turn, was much cooler, bearing the first bite of winter. Hermione breathed in the air with a grateful sigh. "I can't believe how much I've missed the sun in the last weeks." Dylan agreed with a hearty amen. That caused both Harry and Hermione to glance at him in surprise. The boy shrugged. "My aunt's got religion," seemed appropriate. Griffin cupped his hands to his mouth, his voice magnified as he yelled. "Hello, Ragan, Neil, you old dog, where are you guys?" Harry glanced around the empty grounds, his eye pausing on the main building that housed the entertainment facilities. As if summoned, a black-haired head peered out, blue eyes lighting on Griffin with a wide smile. "Zach, we were wondering when you guys would arrive. Come on, the game's on." Neither Griffin or Dylan hesitated, breaking into a trot. Harry hung back beside Hermione, glancing across at her as she looked around in amazement. "This place looks so ordinary. You would hardly know wizards even lived here." Harry smiled. "You should see Griffin's tower. It defies all the laws of gravity." Hermione grinned back at him, and they ascended the steps to the wide porch. Through the windows, Harry saw most of the werewolves lounging on couches, their gazes fixed on a wide screen. Hermione gasped. "A TV? How do they make it work?" Even as they watched, the screen flickered and fuzzed, accompanied by groans and a few tossed insults in Griffin's direction. Harry nodded towards the tall academy wizard as he stood greeting the pack and introducing them to Dylan, mostly by keeping Griffin away from it. Apparently it works fine as long as it's not exposed to actual spell casting. Same for the microwave. They've wired quite a few cabins with electricity, lights, heat, and such. But Griffin tends to, I guess the word would be leak, magical energy. I've been told he's not allowed in the kitchen. Hermione looked intrigued. "So they have figured out a way to combine muggle and magical technology then?" Harry shrugged. "Mostly, I guess. There is a muggle who lives here with them, so I suppose they had to some extent." Hermione turned in surprise, but before she could ask, Griffin waved towards them with a quick beckoning gesture. They stepped through the open screen door and were immediately the focus of attention. Remus, Sirius at his side with a wide smile, stood. Harry was relieved to see his godfather looked much recovered from that morning. Griffin spoke with a dramatic flare of his arms. "The other two champions from America. Adopted, of course." He whispered aside to Julie, the young werewolf daughter of another member of the pack, who giggled. "Hermione Granger and Harry Potter, the latter of which we all know." Griffin stepped forward and looped a hand around Hermione's shoulder with a beaming smile. "Ms. Granger, may I present the Pungo Lake pack? Now, pay attention closely. There may be a test." He paused for effect, then began introducing the curious faces around him with humorous flair. "There's Morris, the alpha of this merry band, and his wife Mattie and brother Derek." The two large black men sitting on the couch waved, while Mattie stepped forward to draw surprised Hermione into a hug. Then Kevin and his daughter Julie, who I must say is the prettiest of this group. The young teen blushed as she waved, her light green eyes pausing on Harry, who fidgeted slightly. He ignored Hermione's questioning glance as Griffin continued. "They're my dearest friend, former Lieutenant Neil Ragan and his lovely wife Lucy, who deserves better, I do say." Hermione shook hands with Neil, then accepted another hug from Lucy, looking a tad bit dazed with all the names. "Grace, the Maynator over in the corner, is our resident beauty queen." The blonde-haired woman glared at him and made a rude gesture with her hand before smiling brightly at Hermione. Beside her is Laurie, the sweetest of our bunch. Laurie, her hazy gold eyes staring straight ahead, nodded in their general direction. "And last but not least, our young scrap Zeke, and his two beautiful sisters Hank and Glory. The black-haired werewolf, looking to be in his early 20s, ignored them, though his two sisters jumped to their feet to swarm towards Hermione. "Wonderful to meet you. I'm Glory. So nice to have another witch here. Being surrounded by all these wolves can be so tedious." Hermione blinked at the tall blonde. "You are not a werewolf too?" The woman beside her, Hank, snorted. "No, we're just here to keep our brother out of trouble." Glory began to pull Hermione away towards another couch, chatting excitedly about a visit to London's Diagon Alley she had taken as a young witch. Hank and Grace followed behind, leaving Harry standing alone as the werewolves settled themselves back onto couches facing the large TV, with Griffin placed as far away as possible. Remus and Sirius came up to stand beside him where he stood near the door. "How has it been at Durmstrang?" Remus questioned, golden brown eyes solemn. "I haven't had a letter from you recently." Harry glanced towards Sirius, who looked away. "Fine. The first task is in a few days, the end of the month. How has it been here?" A dreamy look came into the wizard's eyes. "Wonderful, Harry. I feel like I've gained a family here. They understand me." Harry nodded, uncertain what to say. Sirius spoke softly. "I told him everything, Harry." Remus's face darkened. "I can't believe you were so irresponsible. This thing with the hounds has gotten out of control. We had Lucy drive into the nearby town and purchase a local newspaper. Nothing mentioned there. But she was able to use a computer at the public library, and she said the website is pretty incriminating and not just focused on Europe. There are photos from around the world, Australia, China, even here in North America. Why the ministry hasn't reacted, I can't say." Sirius grimaced. Fudge, even if he somehow became aware of it, would never take it seriously. But the next session of the Iqua is during the summer solstice. If things don't go haywire before that day, I don't doubt it will be brought to the various governments' notice then. Remus looked over at his friend with concern. "I don't think you should get involved any more with this. If it ever became known, it would hurt you at the trial in January." Sirius laughed harshly. "I don't think anything can hurt me more at this point. If I somehow get an innocent verdict at the trial, I will make it my mission to bring James down, whether as an aura or on my own. They will take me back, I know it. I was one of their top auras, and I've recovered from Azkaban. I'll pass the tests easily. I've read stories on old Scrimgeour. He runs a tight office, and Bones won't hold my past against me." Harry looked at Sirius with wide eyes. "You want to rejoin the auras?" The black-haired wizard's face firmed. "It's the only thing I've ever been good at, Harry, and I have to stay busy. If they give me the chance, if I'm proven not guilty, they will need me. When the hounds make their move, they will need my knowledge about the muggles." Harry glanced down, unhappy with that thought, feeling his loyalties fray and tear further as he considered the two sides. Why had James been so selfish? Why had he tried to manipulate them instead of being honest? Sirius could have been an ally, and instead he was now a bitter enemy. And Harry was once more in between. Would they ever be able to find a middle ground? A cheer brought his head around to the room again. The werewolves were watching some game on the screen, yelling raucously. Remus chuckled with a glance at Sirius. "They are crazy about this muggle sport. It can be brutal, as bad as Quidditch." Sirius scoffed. How could any muggle sport compare to Quidditch? That statement caught the ear of Kevin, who sat close by. He glanced back with a challenge in his gaze. "Hey, don't knock it until you've tried it. Come sit down. I bet you will be hooked within an hour." Sirius never could back down from a challenge. He sauntered over with a gleam in his eyes. Remus took a step to follow, but Harry quickly reached out to place a hand on his arm. He met the werewolf's curious eyes. "Can I talk to you, privately?" Remus blinked in surprise, then nodded. The two slipped quietly out the door, standing on the porch in the afternoon sun, as through the windows the TV continued to play. Harry spotted Hermione looking in their direction from where she sat between Grace and Glory, her eyes pleading for rescue. He looked away. "What's wrong, Harry?" Harry glanced up at Remus before gazing over the wide clearing where the compound rested, eyes roaming but lost in thought. "Did you ever feel jealous?" Remus made a sound of confusion in his throat. "What do you mean?" Harry shrugged, feeling embarrassment curl in his stomach. "Jealous, you know, of other people." Remus frowned. "Well, I suppose I have. Of other normal people, non-werewolves who don't have to deal with the stigma, who can just go about their lives." His embarrassment now warred with anger at himself. Here he was asking someone who had been through what Remus had a question like that. "No, I meant, over a girl. Harry's voice faded a bit at the last, and he purposefully didn't look inside to where Hermione sat. Remus rocked back on his heels, confusion turning towards amusement. Ah, I see. He paused, and Harry saw him glance inside. Yes, I was quite jealous of your father, actually. He always managed to make the witches like him with no effort at all. Harry looked up. Sirius told me that my dad didn't know he liked my mother until he got jealous about her being close to someone else. Remus laughed. Maybe that's true, but I think he always had a thing for her since he first saw her our first year. But he was a bit, well, arrogant. Sirius never was good at seeing the flaws in his friends. Lily wouldn't come to him like all the other girls, and he had too much pride to go after her and risk being turned down. That sounded completely different than the story his godfather had told him. Harry frowned. I thought he gave her gifts and followed her around until she finally agreed to date him. Remus smiled. James changed a lot in our 6th year. The summer before was rough. He lost his parents, your grandparents, very suddenly. He had to mature quickly, take on responsibility. When we went back to Hogwarts, it was like his eyes were opened. He realized he was screwing things up going along the way he had before. Really turned things around. One of those things were your mother, and let me tell you it took a lot of work to change her mind. She thought he was scum. Remus laughed again, shaking his head. She played him for a lovesick fool for months. All the other witches hated her for that. James was quite the catch after all, a wealthy pureblood and lord already of his family. Harry slowly nodded, and he finally won her over, wrote her poems and stuff. Remus groaned. Don't even mention the poems. Horrid things. Still, none of that was what changed her mind. Harry frowned, comparing that to what Sirius had told him. What did? Remus hesitated, the humor on his face fading. He glanced inside, toward where Sirius sat on the couch, eyes focused with fascination on the moving screen. Has Sirius ever told you why he hates Professor Snape? Harry frowned, sensing a deeper story. He's a Slytherin. Remus sighed, looking away. Yes, I suppose it started that way, but it was more. Sirius and James and Severus had a rivalry, one that quickly became dirty. The pranks went from good-humored to embarrassing, things I'm ashamed to have witnessed and done nothing about. But in 6th year it all went to pieces. Remus drew to a halt, his eyes haunted. Harry stepped closer to better hear as the werewolf continued, his voice low and quiet. Sirius took it too far, farther than any of us ever thought he would, and he risked not only Severus' safety, but my own. What did he do? Harry asked quietly, as Remus seemed reluctant to go on. The brown-haired wizard closed his eyes, his voice heavy with memory. He let Severus overhear him and Peter talking about where I spent full moons, left just enough to the imagination to make Severus curious enough to go to the Shrieking Shack. James didn't know. I don't want to think of what might have happened if it wasn't for your mother. I could have killed him, could have been killed myself had I done so, the rules being what they were then. Remus swallowed. Severus had told your mother, trying to prove to her once, and for all that he was right all along about the marauders being into dark magic. Lily was concerned for him, even though they were no longer close friends, because of some of the things Severus had been doing that year. Lily told your father, and James knew right away what was at risk. He was nearly too late. Remus opened his eyes, looking blankly into the distance. They told me I chased him from the shack, after Severus blindly opened the door. He had managed to hold me off with some dark spells, but I was young, in prime shape from running with my friends most moons, and Peter was with me, following us, not even trying to stop it. Peter hated Snape too, because the Slytherin called him weak, a tag along to the stronger kids. Remus shook his head. When James arrived, I had him cornered. Your father was forced to transform and attack me himself, holding me off with his horns, cutting me pretty badly before Snape could escape. I had to be put into the hospital wing for nearly a week. James told Lily everything, about myself, about Sirius. I don't think she talked to Sirius for 3 months after that. But she forgave James, and I think that's when she began to love him. Because your father still hated Snape, you know. But he saved him anyway. And in the end, that was it for your mother's friendship with Snape. He could never forgive her for being friends with the Gryffindors who he thinks tried to kill him. Harry's mind whirled, the story filling in so many of the blanks in his mind. The reason Professor Snape had never liked him, why the man had been so determined to bring Sirius down and suspect Remus as well. And his mother, at the center of it all. Lily. He wished he could remember her. Wished he could have met the witch he was only just learning about. Remus sighed. I don't like bringing up ancient history, but you need to know. None of us were perfect, Harry. Not Sirius, not your parents, not me, not Peter. Those of us left still aren't. If you're interested in this girl, don't let jealousy be your motivation, not something negative like that. Let it be genuine fondness, a desire to make her happy. Girls aren't as shallow as Sirius makes them out to be. Gifts and fancy words might make her take notice of you, but in the end they won't win her heart. Your dad found that out too. It takes action. Harry's shoulders slumped. I don't know what I can do. I've never felt this way before. Remus chuckled and laid a hand on his shoulder, squeezing slightly before releasing him. You've got all the time in the world. You're only a teenager, Harry, though you may feel a world older. You shouldn't be so serious yet. Give it time. Harry nodded and followed the older man back into the gathering, Remus's words ringing in his mind. Time, did he have so much time? Harry didn't feel like a child. The very notion put him on edge. He couldn't afford to be a child. He couldn't afford to not be serious. Harry had to be responsible. He had both wealth and power on his side, and more enemies than he could combat alone. He wasn't only a teenager, he was the heir of House Potter and Black, a mage, a runic wizard dedicated to the sun. He had felt its judging fire and survived. He had killed a man and harmed others. As little as a century ago, none would even try to paste such a label on him. 14, then, was more than old enough to be an adult, to take responsibility and be held accountable for his actions. And if he wanted to prove to Hermione that he was interested in her, that he liked her for everything she was and had been to him, then he couldn't afford to be a child about it either. He wouldn't lash out at her for feeling jealous himself. He wouldn't sabotage any relationship she might have with Draco if that was what she wanted. But he wouldn't give up either. He would prove to her that he was a better man than his Slytherin friend, that he would always stand by her. She had turned to him when she was in trouble. She had came to him when she was sad or hurt. He protected her. He had gone to Durmstrang for her. She was his best friend. And he would help her see that he could be everything she needed if she would have him. As the sun set, the werewolves began to grow edgy. The jostling took on a sharper edge. Words became lower, more growl than voice. Hermione sat between the two witches and watched as the werewolves began to separate themselves. Lucy, Neil's muggle wife, was the first to excuse herself to the kitchen. Hermione saw the tears glimmer in her eyes, but Glory had whispered to her to let the woman go. It's always tough on her. She wants a child, the blonde said matter-of-factly. Hank spoke up then, but she never lets it show to Neil. She's always the first to welcome them when they get back. About kills herself making snacks and stuff for them to eat in the morning, and won't accept help. Stays up the entire night worrying. Kevin got shot last year during a full moon, and she treated the wounds while he was still in wolf form. They were afraid the lead might do damage if he transformed back. What? Hermione asked, horror coming into her voice. Glory nodded with a sigh. She's got vet training. Hermione shook her head, eyes wide. No, I mean he was shot at. Hank shrugged. Big coyote problem around here, and some of the locals ain't too happy about the wolves either. Quite a few of the muggle wolves have been killed, and it's open season on the coyotes. From a distance, they don't look very different. Hermione shook her head, watching the doorway to the kitchen where the woman had disappeared with more sympathy. She would be worried too. In fact, she would be terrified if the man she loved was in such a situation. She watched as the young black-haired man, Zeke, yawned widely, showing teeth that had become sharp and protruded. She shuddered. Glory nudged her. We can leave if you want. Me and Hank's cabin's got everything you might need. You're welcome to sleep there tonight. I think Griffin's nephew is going to stay with him in the tower. Hermione glanced toward Dylan, where he stood by the door laughing with his uncle. She nearly jumped from her skin as the werewolves began to rise in nearly one fluid motion. Hank whispered in her ear, "Creepy, ain't it?" Glory pinched her sister with a glare, to which the brown-haired woman rolled her eyes. Hermione relaxed slightly at the byplay. If the two witches weren't nervous, why should she be? And anyway, they were all on Wolfsbane. And Harry was there. Her eyes went to where her friend stood beside Sirius, deep green eyes focused on the werewolves. He hadn't looked at her since they had separated, nor spoken to her. Was he still angry about Draco? Was he even angry at all? Her confusion only aggravated her. She felt like one of her old roommates, Lavender, endlessly agonizing over what some boy did or did not feel. She just wanted to know what he was thinking, and she was too afraid to find out for herself through their bond. The werewolves began to move toward the door, graceful and synchronized, as if partaking in some familiar ritual. Harry turned, and for the first time began moving toward her. Hermione's stomach fluttered. His eyes were so intense, the air around him beginning to fluctuate with rising power. She heard the TV turn to static, and immediately Harry began reining himself in with only a slight pause. The television resumed its sports spiel. Harry stopped in front of her, running a hand through his long hair in a gesture she had observed often when he was about to do something he would rather not. "I've got to go now. You'll be all right." His gaze flickered to Glory and Hank, who both waved their hand in an identical motion of dismissal. Hermione bit her lip and nodded. "Yes, I'm fine." Harry nodded, his eyes going distant. He then reached out a hand to her. She looked down at it, then hesitantly put her own inside his. He drew her to her feet, suddenly closer than before, and his mind brushed against hers. "I'll be back in the morning. Watch these two. Remus tells me they can be devious." Hermione felt herself going red at the contact, her eyes dropping down to where his hand clasped hers. His words barely penetrated her mind as it whirled in confused emotion. "I'll be fine." She didn't know what else to say, finding herself more and more uncomfortable, especially with the curious eyes of the witches behind her. Harry nodded and released her, stepping back. "See you in the morning." He whirled and stalked away, the same confident stride of the werewolves before him. She watched him leave, her emotions still whirling. "So, you two an item," the chirpy voice behind her made her jump. She turned to see Glory smiling brightly with delight. Hank rolled her eyes again, folding her arms. "Don't let her drill you, girl. She'll never stop once started. Ain't much for us to get up to out here in the middle of nowhere. She takes the gossip where she can find it." Hermione glanced from one sister to another and resisted the urge to groan at the night ahead. Harry stood beside Remus as the sun's rays began to fade behind the tall skeletal trees. All of the wolves had gone still, eyes locked on the pale moon above as it began to brighten with the darkening night. The air was full of anticipation, their breath misting in front of them. Dylan and Griffin had disappeared towards the wizard's tower. Harry had watched them go, then glanced behind to where Hermione had reluctantly followed Zeke's older sisters to their cabin. She would be safe there, far from where the werewolves roamed. Harry wasn't sure why he felt the need to know exactly where she was, but a part of him was still on the razor sharp edge it had lain in at Durmstrang, not ready to relax now that they were in relative safety. Remus gasped. Harry's body tightened, and his head lifted to see the last glimmer of blood red and vibrant pink fade from the horizon. The full moon shone down, bloated and yet hungry, her power reaching down to them in strands of electric exultation. The werewolves screamed as they began to contort, their bodies bending and breaking, the snap of bone and rush of fur filling the air with agony. Over it all the moon rose, satisfied with witnessing the transformation, yearning for more chain, more magic, more life. Morris howled, the solid black wolf leading the pack into song. Sirius joined in along with them, his dog's voice rough next to the piercing high notes of the pack. Morris was the first to leap, the alpha leading the pack into the forest. There was no hesitation from Remus this time. The brown-tinted wolf did not glance towards Harry for approval, but followed the pack without qualm, his baying voice shadowing the others. Harry let his own power free, his shoulders relaxing as his wings came forth for the first time in nearly 3 weeks, his magic sighing as if a long-held itch had finally been scratched. It had grown more and more uncomfortable as the days passed to hold his wings inside himself, like walking about with one hand tied behind your back. You got used to it, but always knew something wasn't right. He launched himself into the air with a powerful downward push of his wings, his power helping him gain height with speed. From his side, Fox appeared from the trees, a glowing orange presence in the darkness to fly at his side. It only took a moment for them to gain on the wolves below. Harry settled into the soothing rhythm of flight, catching the occasional updraft to spiral higher, eyes roving over the wide, flat countryside. He could see for miles upon miles, not a hill in sight, the occasional gleam of muggle aircraft among the starlight and distant sparse houses breaking the solid dark. It was wondrous, the freedom, the moon singing to him from above and through the wolves below, his connection to Remus speaking of family, pack, blood, blood. A rush of it, the scent of prey inside his mind, highlighted with bright colors against a grey landscape. Harry found himself diving, his heart beating faster in time to that of the beasts below, their huffs of excitement a beacon to him. The trees passed in a flash, the ground rising up like a dragon to meet his feet in a running sprint. He came upon Remus's side in the open field they found themselves in, the scent that came from his connection to the werewolf screaming for attention. There was prey ahead, wounded, weak, wondrous. Life magic blood, there was an echo of song from above where Fox circled, an answering hiss from dread within him, all of his barns echoing the same thought. Take what was given, this transfer of life to life. Blood given to those who can take it, magic running through it all, the moon crying out for sacrifice. Harry saw the deer with normal eyes. He knew he saw its brown fur and white underbelly, its female shape without the proud antlers of a male, the paleness upon its muzzle speaking of age. But inside his mind, the being glowed with life, a magic all its own, something he desired, something he wanted more than anything in that moment. Morris took its neck in clamped jaws, his heavy bulk throwing the limping creature to the ground. Mattie's dark grey shape moved in behind her mate, the dark streaks upon her side like jagged blades. The pack howled in triumph, and Harry saw the power rise, the moon reaching down in wondrous rapture, the alpha and his mate soaking in the life force, and through them the entire pack basking in the kill. And then the feast began, as the deer went limp, all magic gone from it, all that remained the scent of Cooper in his lungs and mouth. The wolves moved in as one, each knowing its place, each taking its turn. Harry found himself at the edge of the pack, breathing far heavier than he ever had after such a brief flight, his power a large cloud about him that stormed and heaved and longed to take some of the magic for itself, some of this moonlight come to earth in shades of red. His fingers clenched, holding himself back from the gorging by pure force of will. He turned his back on the pack, sickness and hunger rising in his stomach to war against each other. He made himself listen to it, listen to the tearing flesh and crunching bone. It was a vital part of the werewolves, these hunts. A ritual all its own, to both the moon and to each other, a bonding far stronger than he could easily deny. He wasn't sure how long he could hold himself back from joining in on the hunts, wondered how long it would be before he himself led the hunt, took the killing blow from Morris, as was a visiting alpha's right when it ran with another pack, a courtesy among werewolves. The moon sang to him, peaceful eyes in a bloody face, and he shuddered, tasting blood in his mouth and feeling flesh under his nails. For a brief moment he was Moony, Remus in brown fur, ecstatic teeth buried in meat and fur, ripping a piece free from the lumpy mass, vitality and life flowing through every fabric of his being. And then he was himself, simply Harry, steel-winged and apart from the others, powerful enough to decline the feast, weak enough to turn away from the thought of killing for power, even when the life taken was old and weak and dying, an animal that would not last another winter. Hermione jerked from where she sat on the cabin's floor, frowning down at a handful of cards. They had been playing a simple round of Go Fish, an American card game Glory claimed even teenagers could enjoy. She had found the math simple, the principle lying more in luck than skill. But it had been a way to pass the time, her nerves too on edge to sleep, a foreign feeling rising inside her of increasing power. Her hands shook, her eyes widened, and she heard a voice singing to her, Harry's voice but different, other voices layered over top of it and through it and around it, nearly foreign to her ears. Lifeblood magic, she gasped, the cards falling free from her hands. Hank looked up sharply. What's wrong? Hermione shook her head, eyes still wide in shock as she listened, body straining for more. I, she stuttered, her heart racing. Glory scooted closer, laying a soft hand on her own before glancing towards her sister. Get some water. She's pale as a ghost. Hermione wanted to deny them, but that feeling was rising again, choking out the words before she could speak, a rising tide of song and longing. Hank passed her the cool glass. She took it, simply holding it in her hands. When beckoned to drink, she reluctantly did so, and immediately began to gag, the taste not that of water in her mouth, but blood. She gasped, jumping to her feet, shaking wildly. BB blood. The two sisters crowded her on either side, exchanging glances over her head. and as soon as the feeling had come, it left. She found herself going limp, helped to the bed nearby by a worried Glory. Dear, what happened? Has something happened out there? When Hermione only stared at the witch in increasing confusion and embarrassment, Hank huffed. You can tell us if you're an empath. Isn't anything to be ashamed of. I know you guys hide it because you don't want people to think you're spying on their feelings. Hermione blinked, then quickly shook her head, relieved to find her voice was working once again. No, I'm not an empath. I've never even met one. I'm sorry. That's never happened before. Not like that. She looked down at her slippered feet on the soft carpet, thoughts racing and moving together. Hank sat beside her, one brown eyebrow raised. Honey, me and Glory here have been around this place for years now. We know the wolves sometimes come back bloody. Hermione shuddered, remembering the vivid taste in her mouth. Hank patted her hand. You have some sort of connection with that British wolf, then? Hermione bit her lip, uncertain how much to give away. This time it was Glory who swatted her sister with a chiding look. Don't bother her. She's still shaken. You all right, dear? The last was said to Hermione with a gentle touch to her brow. Your color is coming back. Hermione sighed, grateful for the comforting and normal presence of the two witches. She was glad she hadn't been alone when she felt so clearly the sensation of teeth sinking into flesh. I'm better, thank you. I don't have any connection to Remus. I guess I'm just tired, my imagination getting the best of me. Hank snorted, but let the obvious lie slide. She patted her hand instead. Well, then we ought to all get to bed. Night's only halfway done, and we will want to be up with the dawn. Hermione let herself be guided under the covers, enjoying for a moment the mothering of the two women, so similar to something her own mother would do. In the dark, her eyes gazed wide into the darkness above her transfigured bed. What had that been? Was it Harry she felt, or Remus through him? What had happened to the werewolves under the light of the full moon? And why had she felt it this time? Harry lay upon his back in the growing dawn, listening to the groans of the werewolves about him as they began to sit up and stretch tired limbs. Fox had left him hours ago, disappearing to some other place to perch and rest. Harry had flown above the sated wolves for the last hours of the night as they roamed farther and farther into the nearby refuge, following the occasional trail with only vague interest. Their hunt had gone well, and they were satisfied now to only run, to feel the miles pass under the pads of their paws. Sirius had been as wild as the pack around him, as lost to the moon's magic, as if he were a wolf himself. Perhaps the years in his animagus form had made him more susceptible to the wild magic around him. Perhaps he merely enjoyed being free from the rigid standards of wizarding morality. Freedom. Harry sighed, relaxing into the ground. He felt free. He also felt reluctant to return to Durmstrang, back to danger and the obvious trap the place presented, back to the tournament. From beside him, Remus began to whisper. It was wondrous, wasn't it? The magic, the freedom. What I've had before is like only a shadow of what I've found here, with a real pack. Harry turned on his side, watching the brown-haired wizard, and he finally asked the question that had been plaguing him since Zach Griffin had first mentioned it moons before. Why don't you really join them then? Why don't you take Morris as alpha? Remus's face clouded, a frown marring his brow. I can't. I don't want to. I'm happy my wolf is happy with the way things are. Do you want me to? His voice seemed fragile, and Harry for the first time considered that the werewolf himself didn't even know what he really wanted, or why he didn't take on another alpha as his pack leader. Harry made himself smile. I want you to be happy. If me as your alpha makes life easier, then I can live with that. Remus nodded, the smile returning to his face. On the other side of the wizard, a black head of hair rose and glared at them through slitted grey eyes. I feel like the morning after a binge on fire whiskey. That moon of yours packs a punch. Remus sat up with a grin, pulling his friend to his feet. Harry rose as well, dusting off his clothes with an absent spell. Above them, the sun rose in all its glory, beckoned forth with pale streaks of color that stretched across the dawn sky. Far off, a phoenix sang in welcome. Harry smiled and turned towards the others, withdrawing his wings with a second, spared to sorrow at only having a single night to fly. Breakfast will make you feel better, Sirius. The black-haired wizard grinned. A man after my own heart, Pronkslet. When they appeared back at the clearing of the compound, a hand at his shoulder made him pause, while the others continued on at a swift trot towards the kitchen and living area. He turned to face Remus, who had a firm cast to his face. "I've been thinking, Harry, about what we talked of last night." The wizard paused before continuing, as if setting his thoughts in order. "Don't take the things Sirius might have told you too well seriously. He's in a bad spot right now with this muggle woman. He sometimes tries to hide his feelings in humor and jokes, but I can tell he's mixed up over it." Harry nodded. Remus sighed. "I'm probably not the best to give you advice either. I never found a woman willing to deal with my lycanthropy. Being here with the pack gives me hope, but it takes someone special even so. When I find her, I'll probably be just as confused as every other man on how to go about a relationship. It's never easy." Harry smiled slightly. Sirius said something similar, about once you find a woman like that to never let them go. Remus frowned, looked towards where the British wizard had paused to look back at them with an inquisitive stare. "I'm worried about him." Harry followed his gaze. "Me too." Together, they walked to join the others, each lost in their own thoughts. Hermione took his hand as soon as he returned to the pack's main compound. Her mind pressed against his, an edge of panic tinting it in tones of acidic yellow. "I tasted blood." She looked up into his with widened eyes. Harry frowned, going over the events of the night before. Finally, he squeezed her hand. "I was afraid of that. It could be the close proximity to the pack that strengthens the effects of my bond with Remus. You may feel nothing when across an ocean." It was Hermione's turn to frown. "This doesn't mean I don't want to come next month. I'm prepared now. I can handle it. You shouldn't come alone." Harry twisted her mental words for truth, not satisfied. "The pack is no danger to me. There is no need for you to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation." Hermione straightened her shoulders, her chin lifting. "This bond isn't going anywhere. I have to learn to deal with it. I can't simply run from the effects I do not like." Harry sighed, caught in her logic. She was right. They would both need to learn how to control what was growing from the last ritual between them. Harry could tell the bond's strength was somehow growing, becoming stronger and more easy to reach out to his friend. Soon, he doubted physical touch would even be necessary, only close proximity. Perhaps soon it would not be a matter of reaching out to one another when they wished to speak, but keeping each other out when they did not. That thought brought him up short. They had to learn control, the sooner the better. With resolve, he finally nodded back to her. "All right then, but tell me everything you felt. We will need to make notes." Hermione smiled, squeezing his hand in hers. "Perfect." Zachary Griffin stared at the face in the fire with narrowed eyes. "This is not an international flu. Where are you?" The wizard smiled, a gesture that looked obscene with the way the green flames licked between his teeth. "Zach, nice to see you too. As it is, I'm in Norway." "Special trip just for you. Miss me?" Zach huffed, glancing around the large suite. The students were all gone, to the library most likely. He warded the door, then placed a general silencing charm about the room just in case. He fixed the fireplace with a stern glare. "I sent the usual owl 2 days ago. It's customary not to contact an undercover agent when they are on a mission, Jack. What's this about?" Jack sighed with dramatic longing. "Oh, to be in the field." "It's nice to have you back with Hybrid, by the way. Didn't get to see you before they called you in. Thought you were retired." Zach pulled over a chair, sitting with careless grace. "I asked to be placed on reserve. Only called if there was something they couldn't handle without a wizard of my power. This assignment happens to be mixing family duty with official ones. Now what is this about?" Jack's face grew serious. "This hound group made a move last week, released a ton of pictures on the Muggle internet. The muggles of our group were contacted through their government, wanted our take on it. Took them a week to get me over here, had to jump through some hoops with the Bureau. They always treat us like mutts." The last was said in an annoyed mutter. Zach leaned back, mind whirled as he replied. "It's because we are the ones who work with the muggles. They better get used to it if what you say is right. That internet of theirs reaches just about everyone, at least in North America." Jack shook his head. "Most have passed it off as some loonies or a joke. Their news played it that way, though a few analysts are crying foul." Zach rubbed her hands across his face. "And the governments, wizards, muggles." Jack's face twisted in the fire, sending sparks shooting across the stone. "Same, mostly. The Bureau thinks it will die down, refuse to take it seriously. The European ministries don't even believe it's possible. Most of them don't even know what the internet is, or how accessible it is, with Muggle cellular tech. As for the Muggle governments, your guess is as good as mine. I only know what Susan and George have told me, that their superiors are keeping an eye on the situation, whatever that means. Susan and George were two of the muggles in Hybrid, a joint branch of the North American Bureau that had worked closely with the American government since the American Revolution. Once the International Confederation of Wizards forced the Bureau to go under the statute of secrecy, their own private rebellion had been to hide the continuing existence of a connecting force of about 100 men and women, mixed magicals and mundanes. It had worked out well. Zack had joined as part of his rebellious teens, determined to do something mysterious and worthwhile simply because his parents didn't want him to. He was young enough he probably would have been laughed at had he not had mage-class power at his disposal. As it was, he had worked off and on with them for over a decade before he decided to cut back and focus on his experiments. He had traveled the world, done things he wasn't particularly proud of, and gotten so good at lies that he often believed them himself. But his semi-retirement had only lasted 2 years before he was once more agreeing to go on a mission, this time to accompany his young nephew and two British wizards to the Triwizard Tournament. He wasn't a fool. He knew the Bureau hadn't sent him here merely to help the Academy. It was Harry Potter. Zack had feared he would be dragged into the politics of the situation as soon as he met the boy over the summer. Once the Bureau knew the mage was visiting the werewolf sanctuary, every month they would be asking him for information on Potter. But as it turned out, the Bureau still hadn't found that tidbit out. Instead, it was this damn tournament. So what do you want to know? Zack said simply, watching his friend's face in the fire. Jack's lips pursed together. Did the boy show any signs at all in the last 2 weeks of contacting the hounds? Have you observed him writing letters or using the flu? Zack slowly closed his eyes, feeling a headache beginning to pound behind his eyes. He liked the young wizard, quiet, studious, always calm and efficient. He didn't doubt the boy was halfway in love with his muggle-born friend. And yet, Harry Potter had been linked to the Muggle radical group in London, whom Hybrid had been tracking for years. He had been spotted twice at their London office, and more than that with one of their confirmed members, a Mr. Gerald Steele. Zack had known of the boy long before he met him, but not as the boy who lived. No, he had known him as the powerful boy who associated with a powerful threat, a risk. Zack had always wondered why Hybrid hadn't simply destroyed the hounds entirely as soon as they began to learn of them. It would have been a simple task to obliviate the lot. Instead, it had been half measures and political sidestepping. The occasional memory wipe when one got too close. But it was Britain's problem, Britain's territory. American wizards were far from welcome there, and he knew the hounds must have collected far more than they were aware, hiding their evidence through Muggle means the wizards could barely understand, and which their Muggle companions could not track easily without being physically present on the ground. The hounds in America were slyer still, never quite giving enough evidence for the bureaucracies to put out a warrant. The enforcers couldn't act. Zack sighed, his shoulders slumping. He was gone twice that week, both times for a full day. Jack looked confused. Gone, but you are all locked in Durmstrang. Zack felt badly enough to be reporting on the boy. He didn't have to give them everything, not until he was certain that Harry was as involved as he suspected. He has a phoenix. However, from what you have said, I doubt he would need to be involved. It all sounds like Muggle tech. Jack's eyes widened, the green flame showing them as pale orbs of swirling fire. A phoenix. We had not heard. That will change things for some. Many revere the creatures. Zack's mouth twisted. Add it to the file, then. Is that all? Jack's eyes looked away. I know you don't agree with this, Zack. I'm sorry if you become friends with the boy, but we have to keep tabs on him. He has the potential to. Zack interrupted, anger in his voice. He has the potential to be a threat. Ha, he is a threat. That's why I'm here, why the Bureau even allowed the Academy to send a student over here with me. We keep track of everyone who displays high levels of magic, myself included. I'm a threat. Have you read my file yet, Jack? The man's face looked as sad as it could through the flu. Don't take this personally. It's just a job. Zack scoffed. It is personal. I'll do my job. I said I would. I always have. But this is why I left in the first place. I'm tired of having to explain everything I, or one of those like me, do. I'm tired of spying on my own kind, of reporting their movements like they are criminals. There are exactly 113 mages in the world, nearly even between wizards and witches. 60% past their first century. Only three, Jack, three children. Harry Potter is only 14 years old. Jack sighed out a long breath. And as you are more than aware, by our reckoning he is placed in the top 40% by strength of power already. That will increase every year he ages. Zack looked away, coming to his feet. He had been the one to observe the boy years ago in London to test the strength of the kid's magic. He hadn't told the Bureau that the boy's power had nearly doubled since then, a far greater increase than should have been possible. Add in what Zack had learned over the summer, the boy's barn to a werewolf, and his muggle tattoo that somehow did not render him a squib, and the Bureau would be 10 times more eager to try to control the boy. Zack wouldn't let that happen. He refused. The hounds were one matter, Harry Potter another. Are we done? Jack's face twisted, tongues of fire streaming across his features. Keep in contact. The days before the first task passed in the library, with meals taken most often in their own suite. Dylan still met with Gal nearly every day, though the topic of the first task was strictly off limits. I don't think she knows. Dylan told Harry as they sat in the library the day before the task. Harry was idly flipping through a book on potions, memorizing as much as was possible about something he had no interest in. Dylan was slumped in his chair, a muggle lead pencil in one hand that he tapped against the aged wooden table. Harry looked up at the lanky teen. Why? Dylan shrugged. Just the way she talks, when I try to bring it up. I bet that Vila didn't share with either of her teammates, at least not when they could give the information away. Harry only shook his head. It's a competition. Knowledge of the tasks is supposed to be secret to even the field. If she had figured it out, she had good reason to keep that advantage. Dylan's face twisted. Gal told me Fleur has been sticking close to that Warrington fellow from Hogwarts. I bet she's found herself both a date to the ball and a deal for what potion it will be. Harry's eyes flickered, and he abruptly stopped flipping pages, his mind in turmoil. The Yule Ball. He could care less if the beautiful woman had given what she offered him to the Slytherin. He didn't particularly care about the tasks at all, except that it might upset Hermione if they lost badly. He only really cared about surviving the thing and getting far away from Durmstrang to somewhere safe. But the champions were required to dance, and to dance one had to have a partner. Both problems for Harry in particular. He didn't know how to dance, and he definitely did not have a partner. You find a date yet? The question brought his eyes up to Dylan, whose light brown eyes squinted with humor. At least the boy did not outright grin. No, Harry said simply. Dylan sat up, leaning forward. It's less than a month away. All the pretty girls will be taken if you keep waiting. A book was suddenly dropped on the table between them. Dylan jerked back with a squeak, looking up as Hermione sat beside them with a toss of her head as she grumbled. This is useless. We can't study to create a potion when we don't even know what potion it will be. Can't practice, nothing. And I heard that all three other schools have each been down to the potions laboratory on the bottom levels, which means they are obviously practicing something. We are wasting our time. Dylan folded his hands behind his head and grinned at the brown-haired girl. I agree completely. Let's forget the first task and just relax. Hermione blinked at him, then crossed her arms with a grimace. I hate to agree with the notion to be lazy, but at this point, I don't see how it can hurt. Dylan beamed and leaped to his feet. In that case, my dear companions, I am off. And without waiting for a farewell, perhaps fearing Hermione would change his mind, he quickly walked off. Harry looked away from Hermione as he closed the potion's text in front of him, sliding it towards the center of the table to be placed back later. Harry, Hermione's voice was soft. Glanced over at her, tilting his head slightly in acknowledgement. She sighed. I'm sorry, I didn't think about the ball. Do you even know any of the girls here? Harry frowned. No, not so much I would want to spend an entire evening in their presence. Hermione fidgeted, her gaze flickering across the room as she squirmed. Harry immediately regretted sounding so put upon. Don't worry about it, Hermione. I'll find someone. Her eyes flew back to his, and she sat up straighter. Let me help. I mean, I can try to talk. No, the very notion of Hermione having to find him a date made anger and embarrassment war in his chest. Let me handle it. But Hermione began, and Harry found himself standing with a shake of his head. I don't want to talk about it, all right. I'll find someone. Please, just. Harry shook his head again, unable to put into words how he felt. It was bad enough Hermione was going with Draco. He didn't need her pity either. Hermione looked up at him, her voice quiet as she responded. Okay. Harry jerked his chin in a nod, then looked away. I'm going back to the suite. You? He heard Hermione shift in a rustle of robes. No. Her voice was nearly a whisper. I want to research a few more things. I'll be down for dinner. Harry nodded without looking back at her and quickly walked away, feeling pursued even though she hadn't moved. The first task of the Triwizard Tournament was held on level 14 of Durmstrang's vast tower-like school. When the academy students entered, the room created for the first task looked much like an oversized potions classroom. The corridor they stood in opened onto an upper level with many rows of seats circling the entire stone wall. A small booth, lower than the seat, held the judges' seats. And below that, on the floor level, were 5 tables, 4 of which held a single cauldron. Knew it was a potion. Hermione muttered under her breath. Harry only sighed and followed the other champions as they were led down to the center. Most of the seats were already filled around them, Durmstrang students and professors, as well as those guests who had been invited to watch the spectacle. Though Harry wasn't sure how exciting watching students brew a potion would actually be. Durmstrang's champions were already seated at one of the square tables. Ahead of them, Fleur was sitting down with a beatific smile upon her face, her crystal blue eyes sliding to lock on him as he passed. Harry did not smile in return. He only turned away to one of the empty tables and sat on the furthest seat. They had already decided Hermione would do any actual stirring of a potion. Harry knew his limits. Alchemy and potions alike were it. Hogwarts was late, but only by a spare minute. The room had begun to quiet, the judges glancing over at Dumbledore, who sat straight-backed with a congenial look on his face, completely unfazed. Then Diggory, Johnson, and Warrington all entered. Harry knew immediately that they knew. It was written all over the way Warrington smiled, like a shark scenting blood in the water. The Slytherin knew exactly what they would be doing that day, and the wink he cast at Fleur made that clear. Diggory looked unhappy, but Angelina Johnson was smiling as well. It seemed the Hufflepuff wasn't as happy as his fellows to have a leg up on the task. Once the last of the champions was seated, Igor Karkaroff stood, commanding immediate attention from the room. Welcome to the first task of the Triwizard Tournament. The room erupted into cheers, none of which came from the center of the room, Harry noted. Karkaroff continued. Now, our judges, Madame Maxime, headmistress of Beauxbatons. The crowd clapped politely for each of the judges as they were introduced, no louder for their own headmaster and H. than they were for the foreign delegates. Harry watched each judge closely. Maxime and the French representative each looked smug. H.'s face was cold, Karkaroff smiling too brightly in contrast. Headmaster Dumbledore was also smiling, but in a superior way, as if everything around him was in his own control. It was the British Ministry of Magic's representative that he watched the closest. Bartemius Crouch Sr. looked sickly. His face was haggard and pale, as if he had lost many a night's sleep. His eyes, from what Harry could see, looked haunted. If the situation had been different, Harry would think he was a man fearing death, fighting a battle he knew he would lose. And Crouch seemed to barely care about his surroundings, only jerking his head in acknowledgement when Karkaroff introduced him. He never once looked over the champions in front of him, his gaze focused blankly in the air. As Karkaroff turned his attention to introducing the champions to the large audience, Harry saw H. glance towards Crouch, and the older man flinched. Harry narrowed his eyes. And Harry Potter. The sound of his name brought him abruptly from his thoughts back to see Karkaroff pointing to where the academy champions stood. The students and professors were still continuing their ever-so-polite clapping. Hermione was stiff as a board next to him, her brown eyes wide as she glanced around. Now, to our challenge. Karkaroff spread his hands in a grand gesture, to accurately concoct a potion of great difficulty. Hermione nearly bounced on her feet, eyes locked on the headmaster. Harry waited, hating how the man drew out the suspense for the waiting crowd. Our champions will have exactly 1 hour to complete this potion, if possible, from memory. Each school will be ranked according to how far they go in the process. Instructions are available at the front, but use of such will knock 15 minutes off the school's time. Ingredients are on the left. Schools will be judged for time, accuracy, and technique. Karkaroff waved his wand towards a large blank board at the front of the tables. And now, the potion is the draft of living death. The other tables burst into motion, moving towards the stack of ingredients. Hermione turned wide eyes to Harry. Impossible, you can't make that potion in an hour. I know this one. Everyone knows this one. Dylan was chanting, his eyes closed. It was covered last year. It's really hard to make. Teacher said we needed to practice it just enough to know not to try it on our own and kill ourselves by accident. He continued to mumble. Hermione glanced with wide eyes towards the other champions and their scramble for ingredients before looking back at Harry, her shoulders stiffening. I know it. But Harry, there's no way we could. Harry only shook his head, reaching out to brush one hand across her shoulder before turning to snap at Dylan. Quiet. Let's gather the ingredients. There are only 4. You get the sloth brain and saprophyllus beans. Hermione, you get a silver dagger and start juicing the beans. I'll grab the asphodel and wormhood. The 3 scrambled, but by the time they had returned with their own ingredients, the others were already underway. Harry ignored them, as Hermione commanded Dylan to start grinding the asphodel, and he was left watching the 2. The minutes slowly ground by. He could tell right away that none of the others had to stop and consider what they were making and how. None of the others paused to remember directions or discuss who did what as they did. They all, every single one of them, not only knew which potion was being made, but had planned accordingly who would make what, and the academy was rapidly falling behind. Harry knew the potion was difficult to make. It had been mentioned briefly his first year in school, one of the potions that young witches and wizards were warned against. It was also supposedly covered under the NEWT material Harry had looked over, though he had already decided he had no desire to attempt a potions exam of that caliber. Most people could barely make an acceptable potion in an hour without dedicated practice and flawless technique. Most, it took an hour and a half. That Hermione was doing as well as she was only highlighted that she had inborn skill, but it wouldn't be enough. Harry glanced to a large clock that had been charmed to show the remaining time. Less than 10 minutes. Hermione was slowly stirring clockwise twice before harshly commanding Dylan to drop in the sloth brain. The rest of the room was stirring counterclockwise, meaning they were on the last step. Durmstrang finished. All 3 students sat back, sharing grins. Hogwarts was next, Angelina Johnson gyrating in a short victory dance before hugging Cedric Diggory, while Cassius Warrington stared at the 2 with annoyed eyes. 5 minutes. Hermione was whispering to herself, frantic, her hands trembling on the large spoon as she counted each of the last counter-clockwise strokes. Dylan had sat back in his chair, eyes closed in defeat. Beauxbatons finished, though Harry could see from where he was that its color was not the accurate pale pink, but a dark shade of lavender. Something had went wrong. Time, Karkaroff cried as the crowd began to cheer. Hermione groaned and with one final twirl took out the ladle and laid it aside. She looked down at the putrid pink potion and only shook her head. We rushed the bean juice. Those things just wouldn't stay still. Should have had twice the amount we had, and still not fast enough. She mumbled. Dylan sighed and nudged her. Buck up, no big deal. It's only the first task. Only looked down at her hands, their skin stained slightly with the bean juice. While the judges talked amongst themselves, Harry reached out to lightly touch the back of her hand. He let a small wash of power roll over them, removing the stain in a sweep. Hermione looked over at him, and he saw a glimmer of frustrated tears. Her voice lightly spoke in his mind. I just hate to lose. And they played dirty. Harry lifted one corner of his mouth in a grin. Now for the scores. The Durmstrang headmaster boomed. Harry faced forward. Karkaroff was grinning, ear to ear, victory written all across his face. In first place, Durmstrang Institute of Magic, which gives them 4 points. They finished first, accurately prepared their ingredients, and achieved the correct shade for the draft. Harry found himself slightly surprised at that. One of the Durmstrang champions must be quite skilled with potions. Karkaroff waited for the applause to fade before he continued. Second, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry with 3 points. A fast finish, though an inaccurate shade. Another pause, while the Hogwarts champions smiled up at their headmaster, who beamed back with a proud smile. Harry did not miss that Fleur de Lacquer did not look pleased at all. He could bet she regretted letting Hogwarts in on the potions choice. In third place, Beauxbatons, with 2 points. Though they finished within the time limit, they stirred too many times counterclockwise and did not wait when adding the beans for the sloth brain to settle. Therefore, also an inaccurate shade. Hermione was looking down at the floor now, a red cast to her cheeks. Harry met the Durmstrang headmaster's eyes as they focused on them, seeing the satisfaction there. He would not look ashamed. Lastly, the North American Academy of Magic. There was scorn in his voice, just a trace of it, enough to show disdain but skirt the edge of being impolite. Did not finish on time. 1 point. Harry barely heard the polite applause, feeling anger washing inside him like a rising flood. He tamped down on it, dread hissing soothingly in his ear. When the Durmstrang professor turned away, Harry glanced to where Hermione stood, eyes still downcast. Dylan remained seated, long legs stretched out, looking like he had not a care in the world. Karkaroff continued, speaking idle words to the judges and audience, thanking them for their time, wishing them well until the next task in a month's time. Harry ignored them but sat, a hand on Hermione's arm encouraging her to do the same. She fell to her seat with a whoosh, shaking her head blankly. A disaster, she murmured. Complete disaster. Dylan chuckled, barely audible over the noise of the students around them beginning to file out of the room. I wouldn't say that. Check out the potion. Hermione's liquid brown eyes rose to glance into the cauldron. Inside, the potion still swirled slightly, its color beginning to lighten a shade. Hermione blinked. I guess maybe we did add enough bean juice. Ha! Dylan laughed. You know the rules. Always let a potion settle for 5 minutes at the end before drinking, or in this case, before evaluation. Hermione smiled tremulously. Yeah, you're right. I can now say I've made a 6th-year potion at least. That's pretty good. Dylan looped a long hand around her shoulder and squeezed. That's pretty fantastic in my book. I couldn't have done it, especially under this kind of pressure. It's a good thing you're on the team. Hermione's smile turned more genuine. Harry found himself looking at the arm Dylan had put around her shoulder with a grimace. The blonde met his eyes and grinned before pulling away and coming to his feet. Well, that's all, folks. As they say, time to face the music. Hermione looked confused until she turned and saw Zachary Griffin heading for them at a fast clip. She immediately looked frightened, her hands twisting in her lap. Oh no, you think he'll be mad? Before Harry had a chance to respond, Griffin was upon them. Let's go. His voice was low, dark. Harry felt his presence like a cold wind, not solid but hinting at a storm on its way. Hermione paled. Harry took her hand in his own power responding despite itself to coil around him. Griffin's blue eyes gleamed as they met his, a damned twinkle coming into their gaze, a spark of deadly humor. I'm not mad at you. His voice was a hiss. I'm fucking furious at this tournament. Hermione jolted at the harsh language. Dylan whistled softly, looking down and away. Griffin turned, his robes flaring behind him as he stalked towards the exit. Harry squeezed Hermione's hand, and when she still seemed reluctant to follow the angry professor, took a page out of Dylan's book and looped an arm around her shoulder, drawing her close. Come on, he whispered aloud in her ear. She startled, looking up at him with a wide gaze. He found himself momentarily caught in their chocolate warmth, a haze of emotion running through his mind with a startling blaze of color. Hermione gasped, and she was close enough he felt her breath on his skin. A shiver ran across his own. I'm pretty sure he meant now. The voice was low, close, and full of laughter. Harry and Hermione both jumped, turning to face Dylan alone in the once full room. All the others had filed out, each in their own directions, each ignoring the academy students completely as if they did not exist. Dylan was smiling at them. Hermione cleared her throat, stepping away from Harry with a forceful nod. Right, I'll just follow him then. And she trotted off. Dylan raised a single eyebrow at Harry, then turned to follow. Harry fell into step beside him, mind still turning. When he had looked in her eyes, he had seen color, and it hadn't been with his eyes. It had been inside his mind. Yes, Dread hissed, voice thoughtful. I saw it too. What is it? Harry asked back, idly descending the spiraling staircase behind his friend. Dread seemed to stretch and coil with a hiss in his chest. She who explains. Harry frowned, moving aside for a student to pass, then continued. I know, I saw it when I looked at her. I meant, what is it? Dread sighed. It is she who explains. What she is, her soul color, what she feels. I do not have the words. I see it before sometimes when she speaks to me. It tells me if she is happy or sad or perhaps likely to feed me delicious sausages. Harry blinked, coming to a stop despite himself, Dylan moving ahead and away after the others. Emotion, strong emotion. Dread hissed in agreement. Harry continued down towards the suite they were quartered in, filing this new information away. It was proof that their bond was growing stronger if he was beginning to see physical manifestations of her state of mind. He wondered if she saw color as well, or something else, about himself. He made a mental note to research auras, certain they might contain clues to figuring out what the colors might mean. He ducked inside the living room. Griffin was pacing back and forth, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. As Harry stepped up beside Hermione, the professor whirled to face them. This is completely ridiculous. All of you know that, and so do I. Anyone with half a brain could see the others knew not only what potion would be given, but had known long enough to practice it. And what kills me, what really pisses me off, is that there is absolutely nothing I can do about it. All right, you understand. Harry blinked at the irate man, while Dylan only nodded. Griffin continued, not waiting for a response. No one would admit to telling their students. Confronting them is useless. We knew this over a week ago when that floor chick approached Harry, but for it to be so flagrant, so obvious, it is an insult. Griffin sucked in a breath, then threw his hands into the air before facing them. I'm sorry, he said simply. Hermione looked down with a nod. Dylan shrugged and stepped forward to plop down onto the wide couch. It's all right, Uncle Zack. Ain't no skin off my back. I'm here to get away from school and meet pretty women. The boy winked at Hermione, who narrowed her eyes back at him with a scowl. Harry finally spoke, moving further into the room. We just want to get this tournament over with. I'm sorry if it gives the Academy a bad reputation. Griffin snorted in disdain. This doesn't give the Academy a bad reputation. It gives all the other schools one. If any of our own representatives were present, they would know that as well. And I will make sure they know what is going on here. No one will think badly of us for this. His voice was final, and with another whirling turn, the man stalked into his room and slammed the door behind him. Dylan groaned. Now they got him in a tiff. Last time that happened, Aunt Eileen had accidentally cleaned out his laboratory thinking she was doing him a favor, and he banned her from his house for life. Then he left the States for half a year to blow off some steam. Hermione stared at Dylan, then sat herself across from him with a groan. That was horrible. I don't care, it's not our fault. It was horrible. Dylan shrugged. Don't worry, we'll win the next, no problem. Hermione blinked up at him. What makes you say that? They'll just cheat again. Dylan stared back at her with a blank look. I'm pretty sure the next task is a duel. You think they have any hope of beating us in that, even if they did cheat? We've got Superboy over there. Harry frowned when Dylan gestured towards him. Superboy, Dylan chuckled. Muggle comics, they're great. What I'm saying is, if this is indeed a fight, they don't have a chance from what I've seen. The way Uncle Zack treats you, you have quite a bit of magic up your sleeve. And if it's a team effort, just leave the defense to me. I've got the ultimate shielding spell. Harry felt his lips twitch at that. Ultimate? Hermione questioned, and he saw she was smiling while shooting Harry a look that made him want to pull her close like he had earlier. A smug look that said she doubted Dylan had him beat in that category. Dylan nodded quickly. Oh yeah, see, I had this neighbor growing up. He was like half Native American or something. He taught me some of the magic his grandfather taught him, old stuff from before the European wizards immigrated over, what some of their tribe shamans used. There's one spell that's a shield that can cover up to 12 people in a circle. It was used to protect hunters if they went raiding a rival tribe. It's wandless and super strong. Hermione tilted her head in confusion. I've never heard of it. Wandless. Dylan grinned. Shamans had something like wands, totems and such, but a lot of the time they weren't magical, so it can be done without a wand. Not many people know about it. Those that do write it off because you look seriously stupid casting it. At that, Hermione's confusion grew to a frown. What do you mean, stupid? Dylan began to laugh, gesturing with wide eyes as he spoke. I mean you look like an idiot. It's a dance, you see. Hermione gawked. Dylan continued with a bright grin. You have to beat your feet in a certain rhythm, and then repeat the blessing every minute like a chant. But you can't stop the rhythm, or the shield falls. Its downside is the person using the shield can't fire a spell or anything else. They can do only one thing, so that's another downside, and why it's not much used unless it's on a team. But it can stop nearly any spell or object, except the unforgivables. Harry looked at the teen with new eyes. I'd like to see it. Dylan nodded quickly. We need to practice, all three of us. Get a routine down for this duel. but I really think we can win it." Harry only dipped his head in agreement, meeting Hermione's eyes before standing to go to his room. If it was a duel, Harry had no doubt at all he could win it. The problem would be hiding his true abilities. If he tried to use only wand magic, it would be much harder than his own runes or his wandless magic. With Dylan's shield, though, it would be perfect. They could practice using only normal, average magic, and still wipe out the others without it looking too easy. Harry grinned to himself. Finally, it looked like something might go right. Sirius Black was not a genius in transfiguration, like his best friend had been, nor was he particularly talented when it came to charms or even dada. What he knew was from hard work and experience, years of training and skirmishes, as an aura after his more lackadaisical years at Hogwarts. But his greatest asset now was not from within his own mind, but that gained from the extensive library in Grimmauld Place. When Harry returned him to London, he wasted no time. While the moon's influence still rushed through his veins, the power from the hunt making his mind clear for the first time in weeks, he began to lay his plans. He knew what he needed to do. He had read many of the books in the dark library in his free time, nothing more entertaining to be had about the place now that it was clean. He knew how it was organized, knew which books were cursed and which were tainted. He knew that nearly all would be considered illegal by the bigoted ministry, and one held what he needed. Rituals of Seeking in Chapter 4, on page 68, he found it. The spell was simple, yet elegant, and he had the ability to gather all that was necessary to implement it. If it had been a wizard he was searching for, he would have needed to look elsewhere. But he did not need to worry about wards or the magical fluxes of high populations of wizards. Grimmauld Place's potion cabinet had been restocked months before. From it, he gathered the powdered bat wings and cubed silver. He drew the ritual circle in an empty room on the 4th floor, just below the still-cluttered attic creature resided in. He sprinkled his own blood into the golden chalice, and from his animagus form he took dog hair. Creature was sent to gather the few ingredients he did not have on hand, and as Sirius knelt in the circle, he placed each item he needed around him, ignoring the house, elf's hovering presence in the doorway. "Go, I don't need you," Sirius said harshly, though he did not turn. His entire focus was on the red streaks that split the circle, the elegant loops that waited for the words to burst into magical flame. And in his hands he held her scarf, the very one she had left behind in the muggle taxi during their first dinner together. Sirius had meant to give it back, but her scent had lingered on it, a faint reminder that had made his heart race as it had not in all the hours in between their meetings. He hated her. He missed her. He worried about her. He had to know if she was safe. And if he found her with that bastard James, toasting his stupidity, he would kill them both. Sirius laid the folded garment directly in front of him, in the very center of the circle. Object of sight, object of movement, object of connection. Something of his and something of hers. Sirius lifted the goblet in his right hand in a toast, the red liquid within swirling. And he spoke the words, his white wand Kedis in his left hand pressing to the goblet, its tip alight with power. "I know her. Let me see her. Help me find her." He did not have her name. The one he knew was not really hers. She was not Hannah, that was the name that had been devised just for him. But he knew the sound of her voice, the way her eyes moved, the feeling of her skin under his fingers. Her hair might not be brown, her eyes might not be violet, but Sirius had touched her lips with his, had felt her tremble, had held her close. He saw her in his mind, her smile, her tears as she told him the truth. Around him, the circle he had drawn exploded into blue flame. The objects he had placed within were consumed, the flame taking them, and it moved with a life of its own, seeking, roaring towards him. Sirius Black smiled, his grey eyes closing, feeling the heat as the fire gathered in the goblet in his hand, nearly to the point of pain. And he lifted the goblet to his lips and drank what magic had poured within. Sirius had began to love her, her sense of humor, her wicked sarcasm, her cutting eyes. If that was all a lie, the ritual would not work. He would not see a false personality, would not be given what was not there. But behind his closed eyelids the vision formed. She is mine. It was his first thought as he saw her, crouched down low behind a closed door, her hair now cut short around her ears and colored light brown, her eyes a light blue. Her face bore scattered freckles, her skin no longer masked with careful muggle makeup. She was afraid. He saw the hammering of her pulse at her throat, saw how her thin t-shirt rose and fell too fast over her chest in panting gasps. The vision widened. She was in a small room, the paint cracked and falling, the carpet stained under her feet. There was no other doors than the one she sat in front of, her knees drawn up to her chest now, her hands clasped tight. Beside her there was a small muggle pistol, its gleaming black surface the only clean thing in the entire room. He saw her shift, saw the hunger and desperation in her face, saw her indecision, and then his sight changed. He saw another door, another room. The one outside what he had seen before. It was in no better shape. Then faster, he saw yet another door. This one bore numbers in faded green paint. 23. Then he saw a building, old and muggle, two men leaning against one side that was painted in wide, bulbous words of fluorescent color. A scantily clad woman pranced by, one finger wagging towards the men who ignored her with practiced carelessness. As his sight began to fall away, another man walked towards the woman with a wide, lascivious grin. Sirius opened his eyes. Nothing remained of the circle, the potion ingredients, the green scarf. He held an empty chalice in his hands, its inside scoured with cleansing fire. He rose to his feet, the goblet falling with a clang from his careless fingers, and with his fist tightening on his wand, the picture vivid in his mind, Sirius Black apparated away. He did not go to the outside of the building, no desire to be seen by muggles or appear on the ministry's radar. Nor did he go outside of the ratty apartment's door where magic might be necessary to gain him admittance. Spell was an old one, designed to find errant servants and lovers. Long before apparition was a common skill and most traveled by broom or winged horses. It was meant to help a wizard infiltrate a castle or town or rival manor. But Sirius did not go directly to her either. She might have moved within the room in the last minute, and it was much too small to risk it. Instead, with the sound of a gunshot, he appeared in the room outside the door she hid behind. He knew the sound would scare her. A part of him, the part that longed for revenge, the part that hurt, was glad. He moved to the side with a quick step, not forgetting the gun she had nearby, and with a twist of his wand, summoned the door clean of its hinges, flinging it to the side with a wordless gesture. During the war, Auras became practiced at how to enter a place by force. He heard her shoot. At least he could assume that was the sound muggle guns were supposed to make. He had no experience in the matter. But he had the foresight to cast the only spell he knew that would block physical objects. Solidum Pratigo, the shield sprang in front of him, and when the ripples of impact faded from its surface, he met the now pale eyes of the woman who betrayed him. Hannah's arm fell. She did not release the gun, and Sirius did not put down his wand, keeping the shield strong and steady. It would take him longer to recast than it would her to lift her hand and pull the trigger. Her eyes roamed over him head to toe, incredulous, unbelieving. How? She asked tremulously. I don't understand. Sirius narrowed his eyes. Nor do I really, but I'm here anyway. For a long moment they stared at one another. Then a banging started up on the door behind them both, the entrance to the apartment. What's going on in there? No shooting the walls. This is a respectable establishment. Hello? Hannah scowled. She yelled right back. I paid the rent, cash, no questions. The man's voice came back angry and loud. That's before you started shooting my walls. I want you gone now. Sirius folded his arms and spoke back, voice raised to Kerry. No problem, we'll be gone soon. There was a moment of quiet as Hannah stared back at him with a defiant tilt to her chin. Then the unknown man spoke again, his voice a snarl. You have men in there, sweetheart. You know I get a cut of any business that goes on here. I expect a percentage before you leave. Sirius felt anger burn hot and heavy in his belly. His face twisted, and he strode towards Hannah, wand still clenched tight in his hand. She kept a firm grip on the gun, but didn't even flinch when he grasped her arm. Without bothering to speak back to the muggle outside, Sirius apparated them both as far away as he could manage. It was far too tempting to take his anger out on someone else, and he doubted he would get away with attacking a muggle, no matter how much scum he was. Hannah gasped and yanked herself free of him, bending over at the waist as she frantically sucked in air. The slimy bastard. Who did he think he was? And what on earth had he done to her? She felt as if her entire body had been scrambled up and spit out again, without all the parts in the right places. Behind her short fringe, she looked up at the scowling wizard with a ferocious snarl of her own. What the bloody hell do you think you are doing? I was fine. I am fine. You can't just stroll into people's apartments and kidnap them. This is illegal. This is wrong, she growled the last. To her extreme annoyance, Sirius began his barking laugh. She made herself straighten and meet him face on, cradling her gun in a careful grip, its barrel pointing towards the ground. Sirius's laugh began to fade as she looked around, taking in the fact that they seemed to be in a dense forest, the trees more massive than anything she had ever seen before. Where are we? She said softly, hating that her voice trembled. A corner of the man's mouth lifted. I think we should address your concerns first, my dear. You were fine, were you? Hiding in a dump, starving. I wasn't starving, she snapped. Sirius continued, unperturbed. And as I am already a convict, I do not in fact see any problem with, as you put it, strolling in and kidnapping people. As for wrong and illegal, I think that is a case of the pot calling the kettle black. In case you are wondering, you are the pot, and I'm the kettle. Hannah gritted her teeth. You are certainly full of hot air. Sirius's smirk widened. I think I like you when you bite back. None of that false modesty you like to portray before. Tell me, is this who you really are, this little viper? Hannah didn't dignify that with an answer. She turned her back on the wizard and began to stride through the trees, anything to give her some distance. She heard his footsteps following her, his voice drawing nearer. And in case you were still wondering what forest you are currently walking through, we like to call it the Forbidden Forest. I'm afraid we can't stay here long. Hannah's steps faltered. Why do they call it forbidden? She could hear the smile in Sirius's voice as he spoke behind her. Because people who enter tend to not come out again, a fact that makes the professors look bad when those missing are students. The creatures here can be quite deadly. Hannah came to a stop, eyeing the trees with more uncertainty, her grip tightening on the weapon. Like what, exactly? She felt Sirius turn her around and looked up into his grey eyes. She felt her heart begin to hammer faster. His voice was soft as he spoke. Giant spiders, centaurs, carnivorous plants. He named them in a murmur, head falling closer to her own. Poisonous creatures of all different species, me. Then his lips were on her own, his long arms encircling her, drawing her close. She should push him away. She should shout at him, demand answers, beg for forgiveness again. She had told him everything, everything she could think of. He had left her alone, abandoned her to James and his ilk. She had thought it was what she deserved, but as the days passed and she ran from one hole to another, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid, her guilt had hardened into anger. She might have lied to him, might have led him on, but she had risked her life to warn him. She hadn't had to do so. She could have left him to what James inevitably planned for him and his precious godson, death. She felt his hand cup her cheek as he pulled away. He wasn't smiling. A frown marked his brow, his voice soft as he spoke. I hate you. Hannah felt herself shiver at the three words, delivered so softly, almost tenderly. She curled her lip and whispered back, I hate you too. Sirius closed his eyes, leaning his forehead onto hers. Yeah, good thing it's mutual. His voice was dull. Hannah sighed. What now? Sirius slowly opened his eyes, moving back and away from her. Now, honestly, I haven't thought that far. Remus would say I'm known for going off without a good plan. Gryffindor trait, unfortunately. She didn't know what a Gryffindor was, but she did recognize the name of Sirius's friend whom he had mentioned a time or two. Can Remus help us, or you're Harry? Sirius Black shrugged with a grin. Remus can't, and I wonder if Harry will. I dare say he's not going to be happy with me taking you. As it is, I can't take you to my place with the anti-muggle wards. The only place I know of to hide you is Harry's London spot, and when it was discovered by the hounds, we put up enough wards to keep anyone not brought into them by Harry out. Hannah felt fear once more begin to curl inside her. She didn't allow it to show, fixing the black-haired wizard with an angry gaze. You've kidnapped me, so you better figure it out. Sirius's smile widened. No worries. I'm used to running from the law. I think I can manage to hide two people instead of one for a good while. It will take days to get an owl to Harry anyway, so we are stuck together for now. Lovely, she murmured. He reached out a hand and placed it around her arm. I'm mixed up. He said the words simply. I'm angry at you. Hannah lifted her chin. I said I was sorry weeks ago. I'm not going to say it again. Sirius' eyes gleamed in dark humor. You just did. Hannah jerked her arm free, stepping away from him. Stop it. Stop trying to be funny. This isn't a joke. Sirius chuckled, a harsh sound that portrayed no laughter. My dear, this is unbearably funny, perhaps the greatest prank I've ever played, and on myself. I should have left you to be killed. I should have killed you myself. I dare say my godson wouldn't have been too angry with me. He can be a bit harsh in his own revenge. I would know he's been in my head. It wasn't pleasant. His eyes seemed distant, mouth twisted. But I've done it now, for whatever reason. Maybe I forgive you. Hannah jolted, squashing any hope that rose inside with ruthless reality. He was a wizard, and by what she was seeing, halfway towards crazy. Are you mad? She asked him, arms straight at her side, the pistol growing heavier in her grip. Sirius's eyes dropped to the gun before rising again to meet her gaze. Probably. Azkaban does that to people. At her confused gaze, he continued. Wizarding prison. The guards are a bit different. They tend to suck all joy from the world. Hannah shifted in place. I think all prisons do that. Sirius shrugged. I've only been in the one, but I like to think it's far worse than what muggles brew up for their own. Hannah sighed, looking around the forest once more, not missing the fact that the shadows were growing larger upon the ground. Look, as interesting as this is, I don't like the idea of being here when the sun sets. Unless you can magic up some shelter, I suggest we go elsewhere. The wizard grinned, lifting the ivory wand in his hand. As you wish. And before her startled eyes, the world around them began to change. Harry looked from Darby to Creature, then back again. It was a week after the first task, and the days had settled into a routine. He had been studying on incantations for offensive spells, something he had let slip once his wandless abilities truly developed, and a wand became a nuisance. If he was to accurately pretend to be reliant on his wand, he would actually have to use the thing. So he was reading a book on something he would probably never use again, though it would be useful to be able to identify rival spells. Until he was interrupted by the two house elves, and the words they had spoken to him upon arrival. Harry narrowed his eyes and spoke. What exactly do you mean by that? Creature sniffed in offense. Master Black, that person has been absent from the grounds for 2 nights. He performed some sort of spell and immediately vacated the premises. Creature thought it pertinent to inform the master when he did not return promptly. What kind of spell? Harry asked with a frown. And when did he leave? Creature's wrinkled face twisted in distaste. Creature cannot say what magic the other used. He left 2 days ago in the afternoon. Harry wanted to groan. Instead, he came to his feet from where he had sat at the small desk in his room at Durmstrang. Thank you, Creature. Please let me know if he returns. I'll see what I can do. The elf bowed low to the ground and then disappeared with the trademark pop. Darby wrung his hands together. I is sorry, master, but no owls have come for yous. Darby checked just this morning, sir, and checks every afternoon and night too. Harry waved that away. It's fine. It would take days for an owl to get here anyway, if he even sent one. Harry looked towards Fox's glowing form. Phoenix flame. You can use it to go to anyone, anywhere. I've only ever tried with addresses or going to places I've been to before. How do I go to a particular person? Fox trilled softly, flames flickering across his feathered wings as they stirred. Name and image. Harry straightened as pictures streamed across his mind with the tone of the short song. The phoenix ruffled his feathers and then ran his beak over one wing, smoothing down the tines. Harry briefly considered telling Hermione of the situation and then just as quickly decided against it. It was late, for one, past midnight. And for another, if there was danger, he didn't want to bring her into it, and he had no doubt she would insist on joining him. With a straight spine, Harry brought his magic to the surface, letting it gather about him in eager readiness. Then he brought to mind the clear picture of his godfather, from the long black hair to the elegant robes the man favored. Sirius Black, Harry said, letting the name solidify in his mind, and summoning up the orange-red flames, prepared himself to jump. He had crouched instinctively, presenting a smaller target as he prepared for attack. Heth shimmered around him where he stood, the runic shield a solid barrier on all sides, and Harry looked directly down the ivory wand of Sirius Black. Harry stood with a scowl, glancing around what appeared to be large canvas tent decorated in gaudy shades of red and gold. Slowly Harry dropped Heth and met his godfather's eyes. What is going on? Harry said in a low voice, and then he saw her. Movement behind his godfather had drawn his gaze. A woman stood there, of average height, but far too thin, her freckled face drawn in grim lines. Her short brown hair fell unevenly around her ears, pale blue eyes locked on his own eyes, and she pointed a muggle weapon at him. Harry did not pause to think. His power lashed out like a whip, even as Heth came into place again. The woman cried out in surprise as the gun was ripped from her fingers with brutal force, and with ruthless efficiency, Harry tore the thing to metallic shreds with a twist of his mind. His eyes remained locked on the woman. Sirius had turned at her shout, and in 2 strides came to her side as she bent over, cradling her hand. Sirius looked over at Harry with a ferocious scowl. "You hurt her," he demanded. Harry folded his arms. "She pointed a weapon at me, and I don't know who she is." "You've been missing 2 days according to Creature. She could have been an enemy," Sirius growled. "That bloody house elf. I sent you an owl, you would have gotten it in a day or so, and I had my wand. How could she possibly be holding me hostage?" The woman pushed Sirius away with her uninjured hand, facing Harry with a scowl of her own as she pointed at Sirius. "He kidnapped me, and then he didn't know what to do with me. We've been stuck in this horrible, creepy forest waiting for you." Harry blinked, rocking back on his heels as he looked between the two, suddenly completely forgotten as Sirius whirled to face her, eyes alive with fury. "I told you, we are perfectly safe. I've put up wards." The woman took a step towards him, just as angry. "And I told you, if I can't see it, how do I know it's there? And I saw a giant spider." Sirius threw up his hands. "Acromantula. How many times do I have to tell you? The thing was just a baby and would never go after a full-grown wizard. Also, as I've stated 1,000 times, we are behind wards." The woman growled non-verbally, stepping forward. Sirius growled right back, the two now only inches apart. And suddenly, it wasn't just anger that was making the atmosphere tense. Harry felt himself flush with embarrassment as Sirius reached out and harshly pulled the woman close, his head dipping down to hers. He felt himself stutter out his godfather's name, Heth fluttering to non-existence at his lack of focus. Sirius, The woman stiffened in his godfather's embrace at the sound, then ripped herself free. She sent one scathing look towards Harry and stomped away towards the back of the tent. Sirius ran one hand through his long black hair before facing him. He didn't look angry anymore. He only looked tired. "Sorry. He shook his head. "I had to find her, and because I didn't know why I didn't want to tell you I was going to do it. I wasn't even sure I was going to go through with it until it happened. I didn't really plan at all, actually." Harry narrowed his eyes, glancing back at the brown-haired woman before speaking. "Her." Sirius followed his gaze before smiling reluctantly. "Her. Hannah, or at least, that's what we knew her as. I actually don't know her real name yet." The woman huffed loudly, but remained stubbornly silent. Harry felt anger of his own rise at the name. She didn't look like the Hannah he remembered. Her hair and eyes were different for one. But now that he knew, he could see the resemblance, and he remembered he really, really did not like her. Harry frowned at his godfather. "Why, she lied to us." Sirius shrugged. "So did James. All the hounds did. We even expected they would. But Hannah told us the truth, and she's the only one who did that. I figured that meant she was probably in danger, and not knowing was driving me insane cooped up at Grimmauld Place. So I found her." Harry's frown grew. "And now what? Can we trust her at all?" Sirius opened his mouth and was silent, his eyes dark. The woman, Hannah, rose and walked towards them. Harry tensed, but she only met his gaze directly. "What would it take to prove to you that I'm done with James?" Sirius frowned, stepping towards her with a shake of his head. "Hannah." She cut him off, raising a hand palm up towards him as she looked at Harry. "No, Sirius. You guys are wizards. Give me a truth potion or something. Cast some spell. Let's get this out of the way, once and for all, so I can get on with my life." She lowered her hand and looked at Sirius. "I'm sick of you looking at me out of the corner of your eye like I might attack you or bolt. I'm tired, I'm hungry because that conjured food is absolutely horrid and tasteless, and I want a real bed that doesn't have to be spelled from a rock back to a bed every 4 hours. And I want a shower." She finished that last statement by crossing her arms and tapping one foot. Harry saw that Sirius looked at a loss for words. Hannah met his eyes defiantly. "So, Harry Potter, work your magic on me. Whatever it takes, I'm ready." Harry drew in a breath. "It's a way, but it's not exactly pleasant." Harry began, but Sirius jolted and turned. "Number Harry, go get some Veritasrum or something. We can ask her questions, be done with it. I don't want you reading her mind." Harry began to shrug, but Hannah stiffened. "I've got nothing to hide. If that's the best way, do it." Sirius shook his head violently. No, no, it's not. It's not good, Hannah. It's like torture. You won't be able to keep anything private. There are other ways. Harry felt guilt curl in his belly, but spoke up, making himself meet Sirius' eyes. It doesn't have to hurt. I was angry and didn't take the time to be easy. It won't be that bad if she doesn't fight me, and the fact that she's a muggle, I don't think she can anyway. Hannah shivered. Sirius saw it and scowled. I said no, but Hannah interrupted him. I say yes. She faced Sirius and shook her head violently. I don't want to wait for him to traipse off and get some of that whatever serum. Read my mind, see what you need to see, and let's get out of here. Sirius looked down and away. Then he nodded once. Hannah faced Harry, her chin lifted high, pale blue eyes firm. What do I need to do? Harry met her challenging gaze and did not bother to speak. He gathered himself and jumped directly into her mind, sliding behind her eyes into memory. It was different. If he had spent longer in the Muggle guards' mines at the Hound compound, he would have recognized it then, but he hadn't. There was no magic around him, not even a protective film over private thoughts. Her entire life was laid bare to him, like a vivisected carcass of an animal, open and waiting for his eyes to see. It was so easy to see her. What made her who she was? What drove her? What emotion flooded her on every layer? What memory stood firm and rooted? Which ones she fought to forget? Which ones she thought she had forgotten but waited at the bottom of her mind, dark and dim but ever present? Her dreams, her nightmares, her reality. He looked for James inside of her and he found him. The man was handsome. Leaning against the bar, his silvery grey eyes piercing her own. She could fall in love with those eyes. Want a drink, lovely? He asked her, and his smile was warm. But those beautiful eyes were cold, so very cold. She smiled anyway. She was down on her luck at the moment, in between modeling jobs, and the offer of a drink sounded wonderful. Sure. Oh, but his eyes had been cold the entire time. She knew that now. Her memories were tainted with that knowledge. Their beauty distorted, twisted, made evil. He was evil. A dark spider in her mind, a dark web stretched across its length. Jessica. He whispered her name, her childhood name, the name her parents had lovingly given. And she had learned to hate hearing it from his mouth, then learned to hate it completely. Hate what he had made her. But he paid her money, and she lived so well. Hillary. That was the name he gave her when he came calling for payment, when he called him what she owed because she had taken his money. That was the first of many names he gave her, but it was the worst of them all because she had gained the trust of a boy and then broken it when he needed her most. So clearly she saw Rick, his delicate features twisted in pain and fear and confusion when the hounds arrived to take him away. So clearly she could see James smile as he sauntered in later that night, his black hair tousled, handsome features proud. You did well, Hillary, or should I call you Jessie, my dear Jessica? He had reached out and touched her face, and she had turned away from the feeling of his skin, and she thought, even then, of escape. But there was no escape. She was caught in his web, twisted, manipulated. He made her believe in the cause. He made her believe it was all worth it, that it all meant something, that she could use herself, her body, her words and touch and smile for the greater good of them all. She could spy, she could manipulate, she could be a spider too and spin her own web, and it was all right. Rebecca, Carrie, Gillian, Beatrice, Anna, she was them all. Each name a different person, each person a thread, all tangled together, and it hurt to be so confused. Fingers ran through her memories, a hand gathering thoughts and letting them slide through its fingers. There was another spider in her mind. She was Jessica again. She was growing up. She was a young girl, a teenager, a woman. Again she met James at the bar. Again she became Hillary. Again she relived the evil that was James as the man caressed her skin. She hated him. She hated him. She hated him. And again, a different angle, a pause, a fast forward, like turning a book one had read before only to stop when clarification was needed. She twisted on a hook. The spider spun its thread again, and she unraveled. Hannah. She was made to tempt him. She was told to be smart, to act meek and humble to see if he responded. She was told to touch him lightly, to flirt, but let him take the lead. She was to trap a wizard and make him happy to be there. She was to use all she had learned to make him tell her everything he knew, and with gladness. She was to keep him there, to keep him content, to keep him coming back for more. She was to hold him close. She was to never let him leave. She could not fail. And when she met the wizard, it was easy because he looked so much like James. Easy to hate him, easy to reel him in like an ignorant fish on a hook. his hair so like James, black as ink. His tall frame nearly gaunt, his eyes that beautiful silver grey. But it was the eyes that held her, that changed her. These eyes were not cold. They were warm, full of humor and life and joy, and she loved those eyes. She began to live for seeing them alight, began to yearn to have them meeting her own. She began to love being Hannah as she had loved being no one else. She felt freedom, as if her sole purpose being Sirius Black was enough to sustain her. She could live off him, could live meeting him a few times a week for a few hours and be content. But the spider had her in its web. "Oh, Jessica, don't forget who you are, girl." James' voice echoed still in the memory, cold and dark. "Keep your enemies close, but do not fall in love with them, silly Jessie. I'd hate to terminate your employment, you are doing so well. But remember, black is a means to an end only. Soon we must move on to better things, and Hannah must disappear." She hadn't wanted Hannah to disappear. She didn't want to be Jessica again, didn't want to be weak, didn't want to go to that bar and meet that man and have her entire life turned off course. And Sirius Black's eyes were warm and she was falling in love with them. So she told him the truth, all she knew, in a rush, and she hurt him deeply, harshly, with her tears and her pleas and her truths. But even then she reveled because his eyes were not cold, but hot, fierce and wrathful and angry, but it was a hot anger. She could hope that in time that heat would cool and he would come back to her. "I love you. I could have loved you. I'm telling you this because I love you." In her dreams, she shouted the words. She screamed them and she begged for him to not leave her there. In her nightmares, he answered her with scorn and left anyway. In reality, she was silent and only cried, tears of fear and pain, and the words remained locked up inside her, wrapped in the hope that one day she would again have the opportunity to say them. But first she had to run as far and fast as she could, because James would come for her, and all the people she had ever been would end. Again, fingers brushed over her memories. Hannah felt them, a foreign hand inside her mind, sifting through memories like they were only sand. She wanted to scream for it to stop, scream to be left alone, left in peace with all the pain locked inside again. But the fingers grasped memories and pulled them forth with horrible precision. Hannah ran. She covered her tracks and she hid. She used her secret stash of cash. She changed her hair, left behind her colored contacts, eschewed the heavy makeup she had worn even as Jessica. She made another Hannah, less beautiful, more raw, tougher and stronger, and able to handle what life came to her. She got her weapon from its hiding spot. She gathered only what could be taken with her, carried easily. And she ran, always moving on, never in the same place for more than a week, always feeling like a deer running before the hounds, pursued, heedless of what was ahead, only knowing to run, run, run. To stop was to face death. James. The spider echoed in her mind, and Hannah tried to twist away, tried to struggle, but with the name came the memories despite her agony. Lovely. He whispered to her, his voice deadly and low. "So lovely, Jessie. Say you'll work for me. Just a job here and there. Nothing big, please." His eyes, silver, cold, evil. "Sure," she had said, as if the worst decision in her life was nothing. But she had laid in the hotel bed and spoken the word aloud and made her deal with the devil. And James smiled at her and her heart twisted, and later she would cry that he had taken her that easily, with a free drink and a smile. She hated him. She hated him. She hated him. "Stop it." I said stop. Sirius's voice cracked across Harry's ears and he blinked. The tent bloomed around him in its garish scarlet and gold, colors vivid and real, not the dim reflections of memory. And Hannah stood across from him, stiff and pale, with tears falling silently down her face. Sirius was cursing under his breath, drawing her close to him, forcing her to turn her eyes away from where Harry stood with one hand, pressing her face into his shoulder. Harry turned slightly away from the sight, feeling like an intruder. "Well?" Sirius demanded abruptly. Harry glanced back to see his godfather still had the smaller woman wrapped tight in his arms. A part of him wondered if the older man would even believe him if the truth was different from what it was, if this woman with tears in her eyes was the real manipulative spider. But he had been inside her mind, where she could not hide. "Her name's Hannah," Harry said simply, and saw Sirius frown in confusion. Harry didn't say more about it, only glanced around before speaking. "I'll open Halamsent to her. Give me an hour, then apparate in. I'll make sure Ivy knows you two are coming, and get Creature to pack some of your things." Sirius's arms tightened around the woman in his arms, and he nodded. Harry could see the gratefulness blooming on the wizard's face and straightened his spine and spoke before the other man could thank him. It's temporary. Has to be. It's not safe enough in London, even under wards. I won't take her to Australia either. I can't risk bringing this to my brother's doorstep, not when things are settling down there. Sirius scowled but nodded. Harry sighed. I've got other places in other countries. I'll look into it. For now, Hallamsund, but be prepared to leave at a moment's notice. Hannah slowly drew away from Sirius, turning to look at Harry. Her pale eyes did not meet his own, but focused lower on his face. Thank you, she murmured in a low tone. Harry only nodded in response, looking from her to his godfather before turning away. 1 hour, he said to the room, and jumped away into flame, grateful when it swallowed him whole. James looked down at the small electronic device, his lips twisted into a smile. Tell me everything, he said softly, eyes gleaming. Nathan shifted in the doorway to the office, green eyes fixed on his friend as he spoke. We've been going over the video data collected from our work with Black. Data caught on to it first. We've already suspected for some time that magic emitted a type of electric force that scrambled up our electronics, very similar to the electromagnetic pulse that has already been weaponized by the government. Nathan paused, looking down at the small box on the table before continuing. She has been experimenting with that effect, testing its limitations with a few of the magical devices we kept with us during the move to this bunker. She's managed to find an exception to the rule. James's eyes focused as he reached out to delicately pick up the object, turning it over in his fingers. A battery. This, he questioned softly. Nathan nodded. Small, self-contained DC battery systems are not scrambled by magic's effect. As long as it's small, so that the electrical runs do not act like antennae to pick up the magical interference. DC and not AC, because that same interference causes power ripples that only DC can withstand. James put the battery back onto his desk with a frown. How does this help, exactly? Nathan did not hesitate. It's the beginning. Knowing this, things like analog wristwatches and flashlights can already be used without fear of interference. We can expand this to larger objects until we find the limit, and perhaps rework larger objects to make them more resistant as well. But there is more. James raised a single eyebrow in inquiry. Nathan found himself beginning to smile. She got the computer to work. The black-haired man blinked, his silver-gray eyes widening in surprise. Nathan continued, his voice now a murmur. A simple Faraday cage. Once she pinned down the electromagnetic source within magic's interference with our electronics, she fitted a wire cage around her laptop. So the electromagnetic force would follow the metal wire around the computer, not directly to it. It continues to run even with the latent interference from the magical devices around her. She tested it to the limits we have, using all the devices we have. Until we can test it against active magic, not just latent from devices, it is not foolproof, but still a beginning. James whispered and clapped his hands together in an abrupt explosion of happiness. Nathan jerked back, startled, before settling again with a grin. A beginning. Stephen Wilson looked over the warehouse with cold eyes. Behind him, Falcon waited, a solid presence patient. Stephen closed his eyes briefly before turning to face the man. His face was expressionless, no hint of nerves behind his steel mask. We have a little time. We were followed here, but as of yet they do not suspect what it is we are doing. They won't move in right away. We move everything out tonight. Where? Falcon asked simply. Stephen did not glance back at the large room they left behind as they moved into the corridor away from the main storage rooms. Split it up. The bulk to London and that mad fool's bunker. The rest across the Pacific, scatter it among the groups. Our men are already outfitted. It was a question, but Stephen only expected one answer. Yes, sir, Falcon replied, and Stephen's mouth twisted in a tight-lipped smile. Then this is the last of it. We can't risk manufacturing more of the armor while being watched so closely by the government. Falcon made no response. He didn't need to. Stephen Wilson had taken a gamble, moving forward with his plans, even with the increased scrutiny from CIA and FBI alike. But they only thought he collected illegal magic devices, or sought to spread out the information he knew. They didn't know about Pub. They didn't know about the synthesized body armor that was even now the new dress requirement for all his private security. Stephen did not plan on telling them, not yet. But he also knew, without a doubt, that it would be the very ones he hid from now that would be his biggest delivery once the news broke. The CIA agent might have quibbled about them and secrets and punishment, but they would want Wilson Industries' new magic-resistant armor. They would want any advantage they could get, even if they did protect wizarding interests at the moment. After all, while fighting their current war, they would already be preparing for the next. And without a doubt, the wizards would be part of it, whether on their side or the other of the debate. It would be a new era of fighting, a new way of battle, and Stephen was prepared to benefit from peace and war alike. To be continued. The stage is set for Revenge **** review please. ****.